My name is Ismail Al-Hilali. I'm the Chief for the Industrial Pollution Mitigation Division in the Department of Environment in UNIDO. So again, thank you all for joining this session of the Vienna Energy Forum, the virtual series on industry track. I will be moderating this session, and today's session will explore the key opportunities for rapid and sustained post-COVID economic recovery through the through integrating renewable energy and energy efficiency in industry within different sectors and countries. As you might know, that the uptake of renewable energy in industry remains slow, and in some developing countries, it's even slower compared to other countries. But we have also good developing countries that are doing very well. However, low carbon electrification or heat through renewable energy offers huge potential for industry, but renewable energy technologies have not yet been able to provide the high temperature heat needed at scale for industrial processes. As you might know, most of the industries, they need electricity and thermal energy or heat, and some do require a higher temperature like cement, stainless steel, but most of the food industries, textiles, they need temperatures up to 100 degrees. And we have examples of renewable energy applications in industry, which include the solar PV for large electricity centers, such as data centers. We have also pilot projects, or even now projects with wind energy for steel in Sweden and cement production in Morocco. And actually, I was part of I'm from Morocco, and before joining UNIDO, I was the director of the Kenya Production Center, and that project, the wind energy for the cement production, was one of the first projects that were proposed for the CDM mechanism at that time, the Clean Development Mechanism, and the demand under the Kyoto Protocol. We have also the examples of biomass combined heat and power for the paper industry, and also residential and business heat in the UK. And we have another example of hydropower for steel smelting. So the whole idea, we have applications, but there is a need for upscaling and large uptake of these technologies and for renewable energies at the global level. So industries involved in the renewable energy supply chain will have suffered significantly from the COVID-19 crisis, because after the sanitary crisis, we'll have to face the economic crisis, and it will have an impact on industries. However, we have all these opportunities to strategically participate in rebuilding and growing the renewable energy sector to stimulate economic growth, because now everybody is focusing on building back better. And I think the energy agenda and sustainable energy solutions will get a deserved share in these solutions. Industrial energy efficiency options are well understood and offer a compelling business case. However, challenges to implementation, particularly related to the human factor, can be overcome and carbon emissions can be reduced competitively. So we have challenges, but we have also solutions to overcome these challenges. While energy efficiency options will not achieve a step in sustainable energy industry integration, they are important in enabling early progress, addressing the relatively untapped potential in small and medium industries, and are essential to reducing energy consumption of existing long-lived industrial assets. So basically, the global picture is that we have a climate change and the climate change challenges. Industry is contributing through different means, and energy efficiency and renewable energy is one important pillar of that packaged response to the industry, to the climate change agenda. And in the first part of today's session, we'll hear from Alfred Hartenberg from the National Kenya Production Center of South Africa to set the scene for us. And following the presentation, we'll move into 3 moderated breakout sessions, where our speakers will discuss the topic with a view on the global perspectives, where we are joined by experts from IRENA, International Renewable Energy Agency, ISMAP from the World Bank, EEP, the Institute for Energy Efficiency in Production, and IASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Austria here. and of course, and the SDG 7 constituency for youth and children. The second breakout session will be focusing on country perspectives, where we are joined with representatives and experts from South Africa, Egypt, India, China, and Brazil. And the last breakout session, and the third one in parallel, of course, it will be about enablers for progress, where we are joined by experts from the Green Climate Fund, the Council for Environment, Energy and Water, Bureau Veritas, EBRD's Green Economy Financing Facility, and the Carnivore Trust. And after the discussions in the breakout rooms, we'll come back to the plenary to hear from the moderators of these breakouts of each group on the outcomes of the discussion. And now it's time to turn to our scene setting presentation, and I will pass the floor to Alfred.
Thank you, Smile, and thank you, Anna and Alec. Okay, I trust you can see my presentation. A huge warm welcome to everyone, and a great thanks to the organizers of the VEF Virtual Series for an opportunity for the scene-setting presentation with a South African perspective. I will share with you some of the COVID realities that we have faced in our country, the mitigation measures that were implemented shortly after and are still being done so today. And I'll share one case study with you of a company that demonstrates how to deal and work through those challenges. And finally, I'll summarize our experiences and observations in industry on how industry in South Africa, industry and the commercial sector, are dealing with and countering the impacts of COVID-19. And the way we do that is an opportunity for us all to learn from that. A year before COVID hit our shores in South Africa, the year before COVID-19 became a factor in our lives, we were ravaged as a country by the worst load shedding year in our history. Now, from a country that energy was always cheap and abundant, to have reached a point in 2019 where we had load shedding equivalent to 1.352 terawatt hours was very damaging. What was particularly damaging was that little red blip at the top of that skyscraper. That was stage 6 load shedding. And for those who don't know, stage 6 is when we have to load shed 6,000 megawatts, and we do that in 4-hourly load shedding intervals. That's damaging to industry, and that's incredibly hurtful to the economy as well. What we have seen, though, is the post-COVID rebound, is that there was that crash, that top 40 share represented by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange's top 40, ALSI 40 shares, which are just shares representative of brand South Africa Inc. And they crashed in March, but almost immediately screamed back to levels prior to COVID. Market values today are now fractionally below what they were at the beginning of the year. Not all financials were affected in the same way. We found that all shares were affected in the same way, and particularly financials that were very hard hit, and financials are typically banking and insurance shares. Those were followed by resources shares, and resources are mining and minerals that fared a lot better. And least affected by COVID, interestingly enough, in South Africa were industrial shares. And what we found in South Africa was mirrored in what we saw in global equity markets. In fact, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange followed the rest of the world and slightly lagged that. And there was a similar strong but narrow rebound in global equity markets elsewhere in the world. The graph on the left shows a similar market rebound in America, Europe, and other OECD countries, whilst the graph on the right shows the tech share concentration in global markets, and it trends the performance and dominance of the top 5 leading tech shares in the world: Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, and Facebook. And it reflects a growth of 40% in share value from over the 20-year period from the year 2000. So clearly what we were experiencing in South Africa was not foreign to what was being experienced in the rest of the world. And in response to that, there were a shift in priorities that were evident from the beginning of COVID and still is today. And I only touch on two of them. One is that the government identified that the green economy space is one of the top 12 job drivers in the country, which will aim to create a very ambitious 5 million additional jobs by 2030. The new growth plan that we have expects that as many as 300,000 new jobs can and will and should be created in the area of natural resource management, where we operate and where I work in, and renewable energy construction that really started before the onset, before March 2020. In response to that, I think we need to just touch on how COVID affected our lives and how COVID affected industry in South Africa. Hospitality, chemicals, retail, general industrial, and the financial sectors were the worst hit. All sectors were hit, but those were particularly poorly affected. Whilst on the other hand, metals and mining, pharmaceuticals, and to a lesser degree, agro-processing were least affected. What became clear from the early responses we witnessed in South Africa, but there was no doubt that digital technology is certainly the medium for rapid and smart recovery. Renewable energy adoption was accelerated by the influx of large-scale energy project developers before March 2020, and that continued beyond that, as we start to see investors keen to invest and certainly make renewable energy the new investment frontier in our country. Some of the COVID measures that were developed by government, and there were many, and I'm going to touch on just a few of these. They were essentially debt relief finance scheme, and that was just a soft loan facility to keep SMEs afloat during these times. We also had the small enterprise funded loans that provided a 6-month payment moratorium to qualifying SMEs. We had the business growth resilience facility that provided working capital, stock bridging finance, order finance, and equipment finance to SMEs who locally manufacture hygiene products, healthcare projects, food and clothing, to combat the effects of COVID. Then we had the Agricultural Disaster Support Fund for smallholder and communal farmers, the Tourism Relief Fund, which was a capped once-off payment to SME operators within the tourism sector to stem job losses in that sector. We had tax relief measures, a whole range of them. One of them was a tax subsidy to employers. And finally, the loan guarantee scheme, which was bank loans to medium and large companies guaranteed by government to assist them in meeting some of their operational expenses. But the measures were not only from government, they were from business as well. And there were huge and generous and wide-scale support from medium and large businesses in terms of donations of cash, PPE, food, water, sanitizers, and safe water access. And some large automotive assembly plants in South Africa went as far as funding hospital upgrades to help government deal with COVID. What we've seen from SEforALL was the development of a unique blend of alcohol-based chemicals to be used in the manufacture of sanitizers. And a large telecommunications company in partnership with the CSIR developed a novel track and trace solution to identify affected people. A national brewery in South Africa manufactured face shields by recycling beer crates. So there were a lot of these initiatives. SMEs with digital printers were able to do similar things. I think it's important to talk about the potential that was there even before COVID came along. It was on the table, it was discussed, but it was going nowhere slowly. And what 2019 did and what 2020 did collectively was force the door open on embedded generation potential. To date, small-scale embedded generation in South Africa is dominated by rooftop solar PV. And current estimates of installed capacity is about 700 megawatts. However, what we've seen in terms of installed capacity in 2018 and 2019 signals to us that the acceleration of that certainly has started. Government's plans to retrofit 100,000 plus public buildings with rooftop solar PV could exceed 1 gigawatt hour peak by 2025. Currently, 18% of local electricity utilities have been approved by NERSA for feed-in tariffs for small-scale embedded generation. And we've seen the investment of 12.5 billion euros since 2011 in renewable energies in South Africa, providing an additional 6.3 gigawatt hour peak through REAP. And REAP is our renewable energy independent power producer procurement program. We also, since the opening of the blanket opening of approval of embedded generation in the mining sector, we've seen a flurry of activity in that sector and the acceleration of RFQs and RFPs for IPPs in mining. I would like to introduce you to my case study company. And we've worked with Impact for a long time in South Africa through the IEE project. Impact Group South Africa is the largest paper and plastics packaging and recycling business in our country. And they essentially have two divisions. They have a plastics and a paper, and the paper is further subdivided into a manufacturing, converting, and recycling division. And as all pulp and paper plants do, they have sustainable and significant recycling operations. But what distinguishes Impact is the fact that their recycling division has developed an incredible business opportunity, is incredibly successful, and feeds very well into the circular economy principles. Our journey and our relationship with Impact started in 2016 when we implemented an energy management system, the ISO 50001 aligned energy management system, at one of its plants in the Western Cape, Impact Plastics Enclosures in Atlantis. And that was the first one of its 41 companies. Since then, we've conducted very regular resource efficiency assessments, including compressed air, steam system assessments. And the one thing that was notable about Impact is how they continued to train the staff. And they've taken the relative quiet afforded by COVID to train a lot of the middle and senior management staff. They have quarterly Center of Excellence workshops where we work with them and the teams. So a little bit more about Impact. They operate in 3 countries, South Africa, Namibia, and Mozambique. They employ just short of 5,000 people in 41 sites. And as I indicated on the previous slide, Impact has been driving on a continuous basis energy efficiency improvements and demand-side management strategies. However, it started to look, in its maturing plants, it started to look beyond just that. And it installed a 750 kilowatt peak solar PV, rooftop solar PV plant at its Verstapack plant in Paarl, outside Cape Town, and followed that up with a 1,000 kilowatt peak installation at its Springs plant in Gauteng. As a result of that, and following on the success of that, is now developing a group-wide solar PV rollout program. But they are not resting on their laurels. They are certainly looking at opportunities beyond that. And extensive work is being done to find cost-effective alternative energy supply concepts, such as combined heat and power plants and waste-to-energy solutions. And those abound, and those to me represent really good low-hanging fruit. What I'd like to share in my final slide with you is just some examples of what South African companies are doing to overcome the effects of COVID. And we need to bear in mind that the primary objective of a lot of these companies is to effectively save money, protect the environment, and save jobs. And in so doing, improve their energy performance, and also to promote digitalization. And what I'm going to share with you now are some of the experiences I and my project team have gained from working in industry in South Africa. The first one is to redouble efforts on energy management action plans already developed. So we want to start to monitor them a lot closely, throw more resources, accelerate the focus on them, concentrate the actions in terms of implementation so we could start to yield those results a lot earlier, ultimately to drive down kilowatt hour consumption. We are seeing plants that are trying to squeeze every kilowatt hour out of an energy system through optimization. It is just to shorten the monitoring intervals, to respond a lot quicker to that, to interrogate the set points, to interrogate standard operating procedures in doing that. Interestingly enough, in a climate of lower interest rates, we are finding there are lower hurdle rates, while on the other hand, lower inflation levels mean lower IRRs. So that presents a bit of a conundrum, but an interesting challenge to funding energy efficiency projects. Lower production volumes, we are finding in some companies, forces the review of energy intensity metrics, which for years have been a wrong metric applied in many of those companies anyway. And it also presents, like in the case of Impact, it presents an opportunity to train their staff. Investing in digital technology to improve controls, system controls, process controls, and shorten the response time to anomaly has certainly showed the way. We are working with some plants that are investing quite heavily in improving the controls through digital technologies. automating plant systems to limit human contact in combination with changing shift patterns and reconfiguring work environments and working remotely without disrupting production flow or without affecting the quality and the output or energy performance in the plant are what some other plants are striving to achieve. Expanding the use of control systems like SCADA systems to track system and process as well as operator movement to drive resource efficiency is a tool that one of our companies have applied quite effectively. And exploiting low-hanging embedded generation renewable energy opportunities like waste heat recovery. We are right now working with 2 large smelters. One of them is an aluminium smelter to capture some significant waste heat opportunities that exist within the plant that just haven't been something that concerned them up until now. With COVID, that now becomes an imperative project. So we are starting to realize that there is a way to work through this. Now more than ever before, that kilowatt hour is becoming a lot more important than it did prior to COVID. And I hope that in presenting the scene setting presentation, I've given you some food for thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hatzenberg. This was incredible, and I think it's great to understand that there are challenges, but also a lot of solutions with renewable energy and energy efficiency. So with this said, I would like to welcome you to our breakout room discussions now. To access them, please click on the series button to the left. To our speakers, please enter your assigned breakout room, and to our participants, please feel free to virtually walk around our different breakout rooms and select the one that you are most interested in. Also remember that you are welcome to ask any questions or make any comments using the chat to the right during the discussions. And last but not least, we want to let you know that we have recently opened a networking station here at the VEF Virtual Series. So if you're interested in connecting with our great pool of speakers and participants, we'll give you 15 minutes after the event, so from 3:30 to 3:45, for you to do so. So please head over to the networking station at the end. For now, I wish you all great sessions. Thank you once again for joining.
Just go ahead and set the scene a little bit. So my name is Brian Dean. I'm the head of energy efficiency at Sustainable Energy for All. And of course, our goal is to make sure that we're achieving SDG 7. So obviously great to have Asma here from the SDG 7 youth constituency. And, you know, industrial sectors are really big part of this story. So I think this topic of, you know, what are the opportunities and what are the technologies, what are the policies? I think this is a good set of questions to ask. And how is it that the COVID pandemic has changed or possibly enabled us to identify ways to go forward faster? So Stefan and Ivan, welcome back. I think I can hear both of you. Can you hear us?
Yes. I can hear you. I had problems with my audio, but I think now I'm in.
Yeah, so, sounds great. Excellent. So we don't have a ton of time, of course, and the time will go fast. And generally we have a few questions regarding the opportunities and the technologies and the policies. And I think what I'll want to do is follow the sequence that we received in the email, where we would start with you, Ivan. And in this first round first round question, I want to really focus on the word opportunity and really what are the countries, what are the sectors within the industrial world, the industrial sector, what are the biggest opportunities, and how is it that, as we heard in the scene setting presentation, how is it that COVID has changed? We have these underlying trends. We know that some sectors are hard to abate from an energy efficiency perspective and rely heavily on renewables in order to achieve SDG 7 targets and Paris Agreement. But how has the world changed, and what are these big opportunities? So with that, I'll start off with you, Ivan. From a World Bank SMAP perspective, you work with a lot of countries around the world. So what are your thoughts on what are the biggest opportunity countries, the sectors within the industrial sector, and what are these opportunities that you're seeing, and how does it change with COVID?
Thanks, Brian, and thanks for the invitation. So if you allow me a brief rant before that, a brief comment on untapped and tapped opportunities. So there's a notion that energy efficiency is a diminishing and increasingly costly resource, where you start with the so-called low-hanging fruits, and then as you implement measures, you start running out of economically viable solutions. So this is like if you have a 10,000-acre orchard with apples, and you handpick only the ones that are arm's reach and closest to you. So yes, you will get some apples, but you'll be losing the majority of your production. So no serious industrial enterprises run this way, right? So why should we tackle energy efficiency like this? So if you see the front-runner countries in energy efficiency, they have been reaping fairly consistent efficiency gains for decades. And the more they search for opportunities and put resources, policies, innovation, and creativity, the more they find, effectively increasing the size of the potential and reducing the cost. So you may end up in a situation where the best results are where the energy efficiency potentials are already being tapped and not where they're untapped. So I know this sounds counterintuitive, but back to your question. So I saw the criteria to categorize countries in the background paper, including having industrial commitments in their NDCs, being a big greenhouse gas emitter, having high clean energy investment potential, etc. And all this makes sense and will produce a reasonable list. But going to your question, instead of naming countries, I would like to add two criteria that in our experience with our work with the World Bank and our clients are very important. First is that you need countries where you have committed champions who are leaders, that they think big and will make things happen. And I know this is not very scientific, but who hasn't had the frustration of great projects that ended nowhere because there was nobody interested or capable of making them happen? And the second is greenfield versus brownfield industrial developments. So I think that it's generally better and more impactful to make things right from the start instead of repairing along the way, avoiding costly and suboptimal efficiency improvements. So this is not contradictory with what I just said on ATAP, provided your approach to energy efficiency is full-fledged and not the low-hanging fruit piecemeal one. So needless to say that most of the greenfield developments are in rapidly developing countries in Asia and Africa, where we have the opportunity to leapfrog technologies, avoiding costly lock-ins. Now, in terms of sectors, I see two broad groups, where on one hand, you have large energy-intensive industries, iron, steel, cement, chemicals, with high technical capacity and resources and relatively few periods on hand, with huge potentials on reducing emissions, increasing efficiency, and incorporating renewables. And on the other, these small and medium-sized enterprises in industry like food and beverages and textiles, which are present in most countries, which are usually neglected. So again, both have significant untapped opportunities, but the approach and instruments to read them are totally different. And we can get into how in the later questions. Thanks.
That's great, Ivan. That's a great set of, I've got a bunch of notes from there, and I really like the low-hanging fruit analogy that you have. And yeah, the medium-sized enterprises are certainly one of those that could get left behind if we only looked at the low-hanging fruit. So I really like that aspect. Roland, I'll hand it over to you. And with Irina, of course, you're bringing the renewables perspective, and there are certainly some sectors that cannot achieve the clean energy transition without renewables. And where is it that you see the big opportunities, and what's your framing of it?
What we clearly see as Irina, and let's say looking into the business as usual plans of the countries, which partly already include the possibility to mitigate CO2 emissions and to kind of address the 1.5 degrees scenario that has been discussed in the Paris Agreement. And let's say Irina, with the global renewable energy outlook, of course, sees that there are investment needed of about 110 trillion US dollar till 2050 to do the complete energy sector transformation globally. But of course, this is coming with additional benefits and things. If we see in the investment plans of the countries, as in the business as usual case, those investments are in the range of about 90 US dollar trillion till 2050. And let's say, taken that the countries take this serious, we at IRENA see an opportunity here to use the investments into renewable energies as a possibility to overcome the COVID crisis and to create recovery and overcoming the economic crisis. And what we in principle did is we looked in our plans and we said, okay, if there is an interest, and some of the governments, like in Europe also, they are really going for the opportunity to do now invest in additional investments to overcome the crisis. And let's say IRENA sees that, for instance, in the time from 2021 till 2023, there would be a possibility to, let's say, spend about $6 trillion in this time from 2021 till 2023, of which 1.5 trillion would go into renewables, about 1.0 trillion would go into innovation and research and development, and 1.3 trillion would go into electrification and the infrastructure, and about 3 trillion in energy efficiency measures. So that would kind of would have a lot of impact. And let's say these government funds can of course be leveraged by the factor 3 to 4 by the private sector, and let's say this would really create a huge impact. So we are assuming that substantial jobs would be created by doing so. We see that let's say this would cause about 1.1% of global GDP on average between 2020 and 2023. And we also see that, let's say, there would be, let's say, about 25 jobs created in the field of renewables for each million invested into renewable energy. So there are some substantial impacts, and of course this will reduce environmental costs that are impacting also health of people. Health costs may be saved, and there is a huge economic effort. And so what we basically did from our plannings in the GROW, we basically doubled the investments and looked into the possibility to spend $6 trillion in the coming 3 years. And this should be, let's say, of course, that would be an investment from many developed countries, but of course there is possible opportunity to do additional investments in developing countries, also in the context of ODA and also in the context of NDCs, so national determined contribution, to be a basis here for investments into renewables and energy efficiency to stimulate economies to overcome the COVID crisis, so the economic dilemma of the COVID crisis. And this is really needed if we don't want to stay in a long downturn in the economies. And renewable energy technologies and the enabling technologies like grids are ready for those investments and to set up the infrastructure to carry more renewables in the future.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for bringing in that perspective of investment and job creation, and seeing that perspective across renewables investment, innovation investment, you know, energy efficiency investment, and electrification investment. Those really do create, you know, a big set of jobs, of course, globally. And of course, one of the constituencies, the stakeholders that's ready to help, of course, is the youth, and they're the ready for jobs and to change the world. Asma, what is it that the SDG 7 youth constituency brings to this, and what do you see as the big opportunities for industrial with energy efficiency and renewables?
Thank you, Mr. Brian. So my name is Asma. I'm from Tunisia, and I'm a regional focal point with the SDG 7 Youth Constituency, and also co-leading the Youth Sustainable Energy Hub, which is the first global platform for youth action in sustainable energy. And we aim to support youth engagement towards achieving SDG 7 targets and engaging youth in sustainable energy policy making and supporting their projects. So in my perspective in terms of opportunities, I see that all countries have opportunities, and if not, they should create their own opportunities, because these opportunities differ from a country to another. Some countries, they have the natural resources, other countries, they have the financial capability, other ones, they have a good political regime and good policies that enhance advancing the industrial development and advancing renewable energy deployment and energy efficiency. So it depends on the kind of opportunity that we are here talking about, and also about the countries trying to create other opportunities to have a green industrial development and a green COVID-19 recovery. So here it's about aligning the national objectives with also the regional, continental, and global one, is that countries should have like a holistic approach to think critically, because as you are a leader, decision maker, policy maker, you need to think critically and to prioritize the sustainable development of your country and the whole world, to avoid climate change effects and to have more opportunities for your citizens, especially for youth. So let's take the example of Africa. Africa has great resources, as we know, but it faces many issues like poverty, low access to electricity. Africa has 60% of non-access to electricity compared to the rest of the world, and also high unemployment rate for youth. And despite that Africa has the youngest generation and the youngest population in the whole world, it faces several issues. So it's good to invest in the human capital, especially to invest in youth, to involve them more in the industrial sector, to create job opportunities, and to invest in energy efficiency. So for Africa, for example, investing in infrastructure is something very important, as it is poor in the continent, and also in construction. That's what the African Union is focusing on, and for its flagship projects, the Agenda 2063 flagship projects, they are focusing on enhancing the infrastructure across the continent and increasing connectivity. So for me, I would recommend especially using sustainably using renewable energy for these projects to enhance the connectivity, infrastructure, and employment across the continent. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that. Bringing this youth perspective, I think, is really important, especially as we're talking about jobs, as we're talking about innovation, and I really appreciate you bringing that to the table. Stefan, hand it over to you. And obviously, you've got this long history of working in the industrial sector. What is it that you're seeing? What's happening around the world? What do you see the key opportunities are here in the industrial sector for energy efficiency and renewables?
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Asma, for the points that you made, as well as the ones made by Ivan and Roland. There's no simple answer, because industry sector is quite diverse. We talk about industry, but it's 27 different subsectors that are extremely different in their needs, in their energy intensity, in the company sizes reflected in them. There are different challenges for those companies that are globally active, because they're under competition, in contrast to those that are small or tiny, that don't have dedicated people on the topic. So as for countries, it depends largely on the dimension we're looking at. Is it about efficiency improvement potential, like energy productivity gains, or is it potential to reduce emissions? They're the larger countries, obviously. For example, China have lots of opportunity to increase upon, and those countries are pledging or have pledged to do a lot, but the challenge is that those countries that have a large opportunity from a technical standpoint are those that have an old infrastructure, old factories, where there has not been the opportunity or the economic viability to retrofit these plants, or those economies that are fastly growing and that have the chance to leapfrog into directly the digital age or the post-digital age of manufacturing, where there's lots of automation, artificial intelligence, and smart systems implemented. So the systems thinking the new approaches like we have in some of those ideal towns, like for example, the concept of Masdar City or so, that transferred into the industrial sphere. The challenge there, though, is in fast-growing economies, we need to keep up the expansion of renewable energy being available to power these. So we only see new coal plant going up in this country or that country, very bad, boo, boo, boo. But if we need to be fast enough to grow renewables, and renewables, they have huge potential globally, but it takes some time to build them up. And therefore, efficiency is of crucial importance, because if we don't need as much energy, the share of renewables we have in the grid instantly increases. Yeah. So that on the country. On the geography itself, it depends on where we are, what the resources are. Do we have good infrastructure, access to the grid, or are we in an environment where we can build a symbiosis by, for example, exporting waste heat to power the heating of homes, yeah, or to integrate lots of space to integrate renewables, to use geothermal, etc., etc. Also, it's the long-term visions. So we have noticed over the past couple of months, actually since the New York Climate Summit in 2019, that there was a huge momentum arising from that. And there were a number of countries, a number of initiatives and companies, etc., that did do a pledge. And we noticed now a year later that in those countries that took a lead, there's momentum and pressure also growing in the economy. And more adjacent countries are buying in, because I feel, are coming to a situation where there's sufficient peer pressure, where the supply chain is leading to substantial action. And in order to get that going, one does need financing, yes, but one also needs workforce, skilled personnel, young people. So education system is crucially important, and also equipping companies with an ethos or with a plan that is appealing to young people. And in those continents where we have a decreasing population, there's a huge fight for workforce. And studies made in Germany indicate that 3/4 of soon-to-be graduates value the sustainability position of future employers higher than the starting salary. And this number is also increasing amongst existing workforce. And regarding finance, we have different dimensions. We do have the assets saved by companies. That is largely due to the ethos of a society, whether it's more a savings-oriented or borrowing-oriented economy. And here, at least for the area in Central Europe, we do have actually the majority of companies self-paying for efficiency measures through their own assets, yeah, through equity, 80%. And it's more the tiny companies and the very energy-intensive ones that do need help. And lastly, it's the financial sector that also imposes a big pressure, a game changer, as I would say, as of last year. One could have thought it was due to environmental considerations, but frankly, they put it straight economic, saying we do have a responsibility for the assets that our shareholders gave us, and therefore we must not invest into business models that have an expiry date. Therefore, we only give you money if your business model is sustainable. That's an opportunity for companies to think about, to reinvent their business model or adjust it, because otherwise the money is being turned off continuously. And why does this lead me to mention the automotive industry? Because they face struggles from all ends, disrupted, with electric vehicles. Green vehicle, great, but battery take emissions, so therefore we need to decarbonize the vehicle. Therefore, the OEMs, the car manufacturers, start to impose requirements on their supply chain to decarbonize, otherwise they will lose the contract. And since we have global supply chains in the automotive industry and bans, for example, in California on combustion engines in thoughts and other geographies to do likewise, or minimum emissions and very, very dramatic fines if you exceed the emissions per mileage. There's a drastic pressure from all angles to decarbonize the whole supply chain of automotive, and that's totally irrelevant whether that is done by, say, Volkswagen in Germany, because their supply chain reaches across the whole world, and therefore, even if you don't have a carbon pricing scheme, you're affected. Thank you.
Yeah, no, really interesting perspectives there. Certainly that supply chain issue is across many of the industrial subsectors. Getting a little bit of feedback, but hopefully that's not too bad. You know, anyway, that long-term vision and plan is certainly key to this as well. So thank you for those, Stefan. So Behnam, you know, at IASA, of course, you guys you give us a lot of great data. You do a lot of great modeling. You know, what are you seeing from the industrial sector globally? Do you see any specific opportunities? Of course, we're hearing from everybody so far that, of course, this is a really wide-ranging set of sectors and wide-ranging issues. And are you able to help us narrow it down a little bit in terms of what maybe some of the key sectors are? Or, you know, is it really that we have to address everything? Like Evan mentioned at the beginning, it's not just about the low-hanging fruit, but do you know what the low-hanging fruit are?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian, and other panelists and the technical people. Very interesting discussion. As mentioned, I'm coming from International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, and we do mostly research and analysis of different energy transitions as a whole, nationally, regionally, and globally, and looking into industry also as part of that. I guess I was listening to different talks, and as you truly mentioned, it's really difficult, if at all possible, to bring everything under, you know, one umbrella and look at that with the same consistent view, because the context is quite heterogeneous and diverse. We are talking about industrialized people, industrialized countries, developing countries, big industries, small industries. But what I learned from Stefan is that I would like to emphasize on the role of the integrated and systems, you know, view approach. Because when we are talking about energy efficiency, and, you know, as a policymaker or as a government, you want to invest in, for example, supporting energy efficiency, it's really important to see what each unit of energy is being saved, what is the impact of that unit of energy on the economy, on job creation? What is each unit of emission that is being emitted from each, you know, different industry? If we want to reduce that, it has different impacts on that industry and the jobs and employment in that industry. So what I'm thinking is that the prioritization and looking at the system and see, for example, which industries in that country, in that region are more, you know, have higher potential, and it can be approached in a more, you know, effective way that is very context specific. But to put that into example, I would like to take two different examples. One is probably from a very big industry, like, for example, pulp and paper industry or other energy intensive industries. These industries have the potential to be flexible in terms of, you know, product that they produce, and also the energy streams that they can have as their byproducts. For example, pulp and paper industries traditionally have their own on-site generation. They have electricity and heat generated. And if you think about an industrial site, or in some cities that these industrial sites are located there, sometimes these are connected to the grid, either the electricity grid or the district heating grid, and they can, you know, sell back the energy that they don't need to the grid. For example, for sometimes like the Corona time or other disruptions in the supply chain, they can adjust their production, they can adjust, their functionality either by using their storage assets, call it heat storage or, material storage, or bringing back energy to the grid and shifting their, focus and maintaining some level of productivity. On the other hand, if you think about in this type of industrial sites, you can think about energy as a service, the concept that you can, connect these industries together and you can benefit from, surplus or excess generation of one industry to another, providing the network. On the other hand, if you think about, for example, a small or a medium-sized entrepreneur in, for example, developing countries, we also saw that in the COVID situation, it became evident how important it is to, have own renewable energy generation in some areas that they are, for example, in a very vulnerable grid or off-grid. These small businesses could continue their, functionality by relying on their own, renewable energy generation. If there is, for example, we observe that in some areas, because of additional home officing or homeschooling, the electricity pattern started to change, and it resulted in more blackouts during the day. And these, small enterprises that they could continue their functionality based on their own on-site generation, they could survive the challenge. And we know that for a small enterprise, usually 1 to 3 months is the time that they can go bankrupt if they can't maintain their functionality. So these are some examples that I guess it shows the potential both for energy efficiency and renewable energy. And of course, as I mentioned, it's really context specific. And I just wanted to mention 2 examples that come from different contexts to my mind. Back to you.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful context. And I really like the idea that essentially COVID helped redefine vulnerability and those different work patterns, work from home patterns, and everything else. Flips on the head some of these industries. And that's great to have that perspective. Also, just reconnecting this whole conversation amongst the 5 of you, clearly, it's not about identifying the low-hanging fruit. It's about looking at it in an integrated way and making sure that we're actually, achieving the entire crop of benefit and having energy efficiency and renewables. Some sectors might need more renewables. Some sectors might need more energy efficiency. And thinking about that in an integrated plan would help the financiers put together the $6 trillion and enable private investment and job growth. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So I really appreciate all of that you guys have just discussed with us. For this second half, I want to lump together this, what we're thinking about in terms of the solutions. We've got what are the key technologies, potential for innovation, what are these key strategy documents, these planning documents, approaches, and what are the policies that are needed to unlock energy efficiency and renewable solutions in industry. So if you think about all of those aspects together, what are the solutions that we have? What would you highlight in terms of moving forward for industry? So we'll go through the same order. Ivan, we'll start back with you again.
Thanks, Brian. And before that, I would like to congratulate the organizers for having Asma in the panel. It's good to have fresh voices in these discussions. So to go to your question, I would like to mention 3 key technologies or areas that have vast potential. First, electric motors. As you know, they account for approximately half to 3/5 of global electricity consumption, and nearly half of them are used to power pumps and fans. So you can implement the traditional solutions of higher efficiency motors and variable speed drives, but really you're missing on broader potentials for improving efficiency if you design solutions which have an integrated systems approach rather than an individual equipment one, just like Benham said. For example, if instead of procuring a high efficiency motor for your pumps with the same size you already have, you redesign your pipes so they're fatter, shorter, and straighter, then you can procure a much smaller motor with a much smaller capex and opex, which far outweighs the increased investment of fatter pipes. And if you add upstream compounded savings due to reduced losses from the electricity generation to the point of consumption, then you're talking about massive savings at a global scale. So that first, motors. Second, renewable energy and energy efficiency in heat applications. So typically, most of the attention goes to electricity consumption. But as we know, heat accounts for roughly 75% of industrial energy consumption. So that's the big chunk. And there's a big potential in low and medium temperature heat solutions, where first you optimize the system with energy efficiency, and then you supply with renewables. And that can be done particularly in SMEs like food and beverage and in textiles. And looking a bit further, not as a fast solution, is the green hydrogen, which I think will play a key role in the longer term. And green hydrogen and its derived fuels, I think, should be on top of the list due to its versatile uses in the decarbonization of industries, for example, in steel and chemicals, but also in other end users like transport. So I leave it there.
Great. No, that's a really interesting set, and going from maybe the slightly easier to abate to the really hard to abate there at the end with the green hydrogen. So I think that actually rolls nicely back to you, Roland, from the IRENA perspective. What do you see as the solutions, both from a technology innovation perspective, but also policy and strategy perspective? I think you're muted.
What we see is there is a need to accelerate some investments in some technologies. Of course, solar and onshore wind, these are technologies running very well, where we clearly see a potential that has not been untapped, and let's say with a huge renewable energy potential is related to offshore renewables and ocean energy. And about 45 member countries of IRENA called to set up a collaborative framework to look into the opportunities that ocean energy can bring. So let's say countries with shores and also islands have a big opportunity with ocean energy. The potential is tremendous, and there is a lot of good innovations in the pipeline. And let's say of course, compared to the conventional renewable energy like solar and wind, ocean energy is not yet competitive. And let's say we need a scaling up of these technologies, and we need some research and development and bringing some pilots into the sea. And then ocean energy has also a huge potential and can help to integrate. So with the more baseload characteristic, ocean energy and offshore renewables can help to integrate better the onshore renewables. And let's say we see at IRENA a potential of about 100 gigawatt in ocean energy, so salinity gradient, wave energy, but also salinity gradient and ocean thermal energy conversion. And let's say so far, this is only maybe 1,000 megawatt or hardly 1,000 megawatt of installed capacity in ocean energy. And there is a possibility now to invest, also to mobilize money for research and development and funding of projects in the sphere of ocean energy. Also offshore wind is way below the potential. Let's say globally there is a possibility to come to 1,000 gigawatt till the end of till 2050, and we are now worldwide at about maybe 38 or 42 gigawatt, depends how you look on and how you count the projects. And let's say we are expecting that there is with the floating foundations, there is also a game changer coming to this technology to provide and install easier offshore wind. And let's say that may need a last push, and to look into the policies to support and also the tendering procedure for offshore renewables in evaluating those and start with tenders in offshore renewables and making use of the latest innovations like floating foundation can also be an enabler. Also, last but not least, I would like to mention hydropower. We also established a collaborative framework, Hydropower, driven by 40 countries. Also, UNIDO has been part of this discussion related to small hydropower. And I think that there is still a huge potential in hydropower worldwide, and more importantly to mention that there is a very old fleet of hydropower plants in developing countries that with easy measures is it possible to improve the efficiency and to unlock let's say capacity with the existing hydropower fleet, which is not being used. And IRENA is setting up this working group in finding ways that developed countries support developing countries with operation and maintenance regimes and also other modes of operation, because also hydropower has a new role in the energy sector transformation and is very, very important to integrate other renewable energies into the system. And there we clearly count on the cooperation of the collaborative framework we have in place, and UNIDO, of course, is best placed there to look into small hydropower plants and what can be done with this important technology. Okay. I could mention others, but we said three.
We're definitely running short on time at the moment. So I do want to make sure that Asma, Stefan, and Behnam can each have a little bit more time as well. Thanks. I think we've only got about 5 to 10 more minutes left. So Asma, if you wouldn't mind going next, what your perspectives are on the solutions. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that many organizations like UNIDO, IRENA are doing a great job. For UNIDO, they are doing amazing projects, especially targeting youth capacity building in Africa. And I have been following what UNIDO is doing. And in terms of IRENA, IRENA is focusing on connecting policymakers. And as one of the delegates of the first IRENA Youth Forum, I saw the great work that IRENA is doing with the Parliamentarians Network and the Coalition for Action. So I believe that building the capacities of decision makers and the leaders, the energy leaders and industry leaders is something very important. Another thing, it can be innovation in terms of policy, training, it can be financial or technical. And as Mr. Evans said, we can have more efficiency in the electric motors, heat pumps for low temperature process heat, and agricultural irrigation pumps. Especially we can use the ones that have attractive payback periods, and they can quickly generate savings. We should also support SMEs as they are a key stakeholder in the industry and the energy transition. We can have financial incentives like tax reductions or accelerated depreciation, and other like innovations. They can be in terms of especially leveraging the capacity of digitalization using artificial intelligence, as it is very important for energy efficiency, energy monitoring, and energy management. Using IoT and machine learning, we can use robots, we can use electric vehicles, 3D printing, remote analytics. So all these, I believe they are very important for industry, and especially, as I said, enhancing capacities of decision makers, youth, and all community stakeholders. Thank you.
Well, what a great list. There's lots of work to do, of course. Stefan, what are your thoughts?
First of all, thank you, Asma. I totally agree, and that saves me some time because you mentioned it already. Aside digitalization, which is obvious, it's about assessing the status. Where are we now? Because we can only coin a good strategy if we know where we are, and that is for the individual, for the company, for the country. And then, whilst doing so, identifying the easy gains. For example, not having a radiator directly next to the fridge. Yeah, so easy things that don't really cost a lot, only require looking and then acting. As for technologies, the high temperature heat pump is one of those game-changing technologies. Sadly, it costs quite a bit and repays in 1.5 decades. But if applied, it has the potential to save 1/4 of the German industry's energy consumption as a whole. Yeah, so 1/4 of everything, which is gigantic. And of course, motors, as Ivan already mentioned, and the systems approach. What matters a lot, though, is the integration. The integration not only meaning all types of efforts, like personnel, business models, approaches, small and big items, but also integration of different types of things. So energy efficiency, energy flexibility, local storage, local renewables integration, and also making sure that surplus energy from for example, offshore installations that cannot be fed in is transformed into green hydrogen, because then it pays as it would otherwise be lost. And the issue, though, is if companies tend to optimize themselves, they would easily go for the simplest option, yeah, and that is buying renewables. But if every company does that, there's certainly not enough at the moment. Yeah, so that means we need, for example, looking at Germany, 25% more renewables in the next 5 years to only fulfill what the companies, as we have established in the energy efficiency barometer of industry, to fulfill their own self-commitment that they plan to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by on average 20%. Yeah, that would already take plus 25% renewables. And that is not considering the process decarbonization. We must not forget about that. For example, for green steel, we need 12,000 wind turbines just for that one country. Similarly, we would need to triple the amount of renewables or the amount of electricity used for the chemical industry to decarbonize their processes. And in order to act on this dramatic demand overshoot, to insulate against these price and availability shocks, it's crucially important that companies focus on local optimization, whereas investors, countries, etc., should make sure that the infrastructure is built up very quickly. And how can that be achieved? For example, in some geographies, there's legislation requiring larger companies to put in place a CSR, corporate social responsibility reporting on non-financial factors. There, the instinct reaction, as we've heard from some companies, is okay, we purchase renewables and we pay compensation. But there it's important that efficiency is being considered and understood as the key lever to any successful strategy. And the decision makers, they are not, in many cases, not aware of the technicalities of efficiency, of the potential. So therefore, it's essential to lift that topic into that CSR component. And quite some investors have written letters to companies to incorporate climate risk in the balance sheet. And the price on carbon essentially also creates the pressure. And that will lead to a new sort of ROI calculation that is necessary, which will end up in a situation where energy efficiency pays off much more quickly.
Thanks, Stefan. And we have just 2 minutes left. So Benham, just like you did in the first round, go ahead and wrap up and tell us how we bring all this together.
That's a difficult job. Thanks a lot. There were, I guess, most of the points mentioned. I just go back to the first part of the questions, which is opportunities. We saw in the COVID area that the low energy prices made energy efficiency payback period a bit longer. But at the same time, it's a good opportunity to remove the subsidies or revise the subsidies for fossil fuel, make the playing field a bit more level for renewable energy efficiency, so that the real price is realized, and those measures take the advantage of the cost, the investment cost. The other thing quickly, energy storage, batteries for off-grid places. It was mentioned, but I was just wanted to emphasize. Back to you, Brian.
Okay, excellent. So I guess we actually made it on time. We've got one minute left. Thanks for being really concise, Behnam. So yeah, I mean, overall, it looks like you guys have really added a lot of value here. And if you haven't had a chance, in the chat, there's some really good comments in there as well about other items that could be taken on. And thanks, Stefan, for adding your link there as well. I'll be bringing this back into the plenary, and hopefully, if there's anything that I missed, feel free to leave a message on the overall chat. But thanks for everyone for joining. Really great perspectives here, and I think with that, we'll head back over to the plenary room.
So my name is Rana Adib. I'm the Executive Director of Renting One, and I welcome you here to the breakout session on the country experiences. And I think we kicked off with a great inspirational talk of Alfred on the really interesting experience in South Africa, which shows, yeah, there are challenges, there are also opportunities. And I'm really delighted to have basically representatives of different countries here. So we'll have a global to local debate, I guess. So with Alfred from South Africa, Walid from Egypt, so from the Ministry of Energy, Ardit from BEE in India, Samira from the Ministry of Mines and Energy in Brazil, and Xian Li from C22 is going to join us. So we'll welcome her when she's here.
Rana, I would like to correct something. I'm from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, not from the Ministry of Energy in Egypt.
Okay, excuse me, because then I have unfortunately the wrong information, but trade and industry seems to be even more, so I think this is, okay, I'll build on this, Walid, because I think this is exactly what is interesting. When we're talking about opportunities of COVID, challenges, the economic recovery, often this is something which is hosted in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Industry, Trade, etc. Whereas energy and energy efficiency is often located in the Ministry of Energy. And it would be really interesting, especially basically when we're talking about the experiences, the opportunities, basically COVID and the recovery, post-COVID recovery programs are creating on renewable energy and energy efficiency. This means different ministries working together. So maybe in your experiences, basically from the different countries, I would be really delighted to hear also your experience on how the ministries work together to basically foster the opportunities. Walid, why don't you start off with sharing the experience from Egypt?
Sure, I would like to welcome everybody. How many minutes I will have?
So we'll have 45 minutes for the whole discussion. Maybe if you can basically kick off with a first remark, and we're a small group, let's have a dynamic and exchange and build on each other. This would be, I think, really interesting for us and our audience.
Okay, sure. I'm going to talk first about the experience of Egypt in the renewable energy and energy efficiency practices. Egypt, the government of Egypt looks at the renewable energy and energy efficiency opportunities for industry. It's very good opportunities for industry as an effective tool for the post-COVID-19 economic recovery. it looks and undertakes in its consideration some points in designing the roadmap for the economic recovery plan. It first consider what we call Sustainable Development Strategy, the SDS. In Egypt, it is called Egypt Vision 2030, where it includes mainly 8 targets. One of them, the 5th one, specifically focused on the environmental sustainability. Other point of consideration is, of course, the 17 SDGs of the United Nations, where it considers the goals related to industry and energy, specifically goal number 7, 9, 12, and 13. And I can give you some figures related to Egypt concerning the renewable energy and energy efficiency. Egypt is ranked as number 84 worldwide in the Energy Transition Index in year 2020. And it has an ambitious target of a renewable energy contribution to the Egyptian energy mix by 42% in 2035 and 20% of the total energy produced in 2022. Also, Egypt belongs to the global Sun Belt with about 3,000 hours of sunshine annually. So it has a very good opportunity in the renewable energy with concentration of about 2,500 kilowatt hour per square meter. So the government of Egypt tackled a certain activity to promote the renewable energy and energy efficiency and prepare the roadmap for this. I'm going to give you some examples related to this, which is a presidential awareness campaign, what we call Get Ready for Green. It includes 8 main pillars. Of course, energy consumption, preservation, waste management, reduction of plastic bags are the component of this campaign. Other thing is Egypt issued in this year, 2020, the first time in Egypt to
I think we've lost Walid. Walid, are you still there? Okay, so we'll jump regions and jump back when Walid is here. I think this is just, why don't we go to the other side and jump to you, Samira. You were nodding heavily when I was saying, like, yes, different ministries working together. So I think you might definitely have some interesting experience to share from Brazil. Now, if you could explain us a bit the context of basically the opportunities, challenges, how renewable energy and efficiency is tackled by governments and industry in the post-COVID recovery, but maybe also touch upon this more holistic and systems approach. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rana. I hope you can hear me. My microphone's not so good, but I hope you can hear what I have to say. Yes, when you mentioned about the ministries working together, I was agreeing with you because here we have already worked together, the Ministry of Mines and Energy together with the Ministry of Industry and now the Ministry of Economy that brings together industry and also the job creation, so also the Environment Ministry and Science and Technology Ministry. So in fact, we already have an interministerial committee to discuss the energy efficiency policies that brings together the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Science and Technology, and Ministry of Mines and Energy, and also different agencies and regulatory agencies of the government. In fact, we, as a government representative, we understand that energy efficiency and also renewable energies are extremely important and a great opportunity for the recovery, especially of the industrial sector, because in Brazil, this was one of the most impacted sectors during the pandemic. The industrial sector faced the most great reductions of energy consumption in Brazil, and now it's as Albert showed, we are having a rebound effect, a recovery of the industry, but we understand that this opportunity is very important to integrate energy efficiency measures and energy efficiency concepts in the industry, and to have a recovery that has a new concept for the industry, great competitiveness with low cost, and we have worked together with the national program for electricity conservation, and it's called PROCEL in Brazil, and designing a 10-year plan for energy efficiency in Brazil. And we have already that in the industrial sector, we have a great opportunity to use the waste heat to be recovered and to be used in the other systems and other processes in the industry sectors. And it will be a very interesting challenge for the government to implement this as a national policy, national guidance for the industry. Together with this, we are already developed. We were already previous to the pandemic, but now we are enforcing this, the development of some financial mechanisms to improve the investments in the industrial sectors and for energy efficiency, and also for renewable energy. Here in Brazil, we kind of understand that renewable energies can have a similar role for energy efficiency when we talk about not using the electricity from the integrated electric system. So we are developing the mechanism for giving guarantees for the financial banks to invest in energy efficiency projects in industrial sectors. We are having a national program with PROCEL and also with the National Bank for Social Development, the BNDES. And also we are having a pilot project with the NAMA facility being started this next year for development of different financial instruments for the industrial sector in the state of São Paulo. That is one of the most industrialized in the country. Part of this, we are also having a dialogue with the Congress, with the Parliament, to implement some measures to enforce, not to enforce, but give some incentives to the industry and also for the commercial sector to implement energy management systems, and also certifying the ISO 50001 standard, because we understand that this also brings a lot of benefits in terms of the energy consumption, bringing the concept of energy efficiency in the industry, and making the industry and also the other sectors related to this commercial sector, residential sector, more efficient in Brazil. This kind of some of the experiences we are having, and maybe I can other colleagues give some experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samir, for giving us a good overview on what is happening in Brazil. And I think I find it really interesting. I'll come back to this because there are some things which seem to be parallel developments between what we observe in South Africa and Brazil on the awareness, probably, how that energy efficiency is also a cost-saving opportunity here, which is probably amplified in an economic crisis situation. And I think it's really interesting to see how we can even activate, basically, or build on such a momentum more. Arjit, is this something, from what you have heard in the introduction of Alfred on South Africa, and also the part Walid shared before in Samira, what is the situation in India? How are there similar trends? How are there differences? The role of renewables and efficiency for industry and governments and post-COVID recovery?
Yeah.
What are the measures taken?
Thanks, Rana. And of course, if I just maybe go back, in India, there are two different ministries who are responsible for energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we don't have a Ministry of Energy as such. We have, you can say, 4 different ministries. So we have the Ministry of Power, which mainly looks after the electricity aspect. Then we have the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, who are again, whose main mandate is to look after the renewable part. And then we have a Ministry of Coal, because of the huge coal reserves that India has. So that is a separate ministry. And we have a Ministry of Petroleum, Oil and Natural Gas, which deals with the oil and gas products. So these are the 4 different ministries who are working as far as the energy is concerned. Now, Bureau of Energy Efficiency is housed under the Ministry of Power. So in fact, if you look at energy efficiency and renewable energy, we have 2 different ministries. But for the last 6 years, the minister we have the same minister in place. So for both these ministries, although these are 2 different ministries, but they are being handled by the same minister. And that has really helped us in aligning the policies of energy efficiency and renewable energy to a large extent. In fact, this has also become a very good initiative for India, because in 2015, under the Paris Accord, one of our ambitious NDC commitment was that we would be reducing the emission intensity of the country by 33 to 35% based on by 2030, based on 2005 level. And a second commitment was to have 40% of the electricity generation capacity through renewable energy. So these were the 2 main commitments which were made as part of the nationally determined contribution of the country. And you can see the second commitment which I referred to, that is 40% of electricity generation through renewable energy, is something which directly focuses on the renewable energy part. And I think it has been globally acknowledged that in the last 4 to 5 years, India has made huge strides in the area of renewable energy. So, of course, the government, when it came to power in 2014, the target of renewable energy was 175 gigawatt by 2022, which we are, of course, very much on track of achieving those targets. And recently, during the UN Climate Summit in 2019, our Honorable Prime Minister has talked about 450 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity generation by 2030. And of course, we are blessed with a lot of sunshine. So that is something which we hope that we will be able to achieve. And moreover, if we look at the solar part of the renewable energy, which is now the dominant, you can say, renewable energy portion in India, the prices of solar energy per kilowatt hour has reduced dramatically. And in fact, if we look at the last 6 to 7 years trend, it has reduced by almost 10 times. So right now, the price of solar to generate 1 kilowatt of electricity is almost equivalent to what we require. I mean, even less to a certain extent, I will say. So from what is required in case of a coal or a gas-fired plant. So that is how the transition has happened as far as the renewable energy is concerned, and more so, in fact, as far as the solar industry is concerned. Now, coming to the energy efficiency part of it, of course, I belong to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And so in energy efficiency, if we look at the industries, we have a very popular scheme which have been globally acknowledged, that is the Perform, Achieve and the Trade schemes. And in fact, if you look at the design of the scheme, it is kind of, we are giving specific energy consumption reduction targets to large energy intensive industries. And then we are monitoring their performance after every 3 years. 3 years is a cycle. So we started this cycle in 2012, and right now we're in the 6th cycle. We have right now covering more than 1,000. In fact, it is 1,073 energy intensive industries from 13 different sectors of the economy. Now, if I come to the kind of the COVID opportunities that COVID has kind of given. So if we refer to the IES Sustainable Recovery Plan, it has been mentioned in the report that the industrial energy efficiency could create between 10 to 18 jobs per $1 million spent. And when we tried to do a similar analysis with the help of IEA for India, it was informed that this will be in the upper end of the range for as far as India is concerned. So that again gives us a lot of opportunity. And we know that the government in the economic stimulus package has given a lot of focus on the MSMEs in particular. And the economic stimulus programs are aimed at creating jobs, upskilling the workers, supporting the domestic manufacturing industries. In fact, that has been one of the major thrust in India right now. So how to go for more and more manufacturing inside the country, and so that we become kind of self-reliant on the energy part as well, and which will automatically result in improving the energy security and supporting the clean energy transition, which we are very much committed to. Of course, if we talk about the energy sector as a whole, then the India's energy sector has showed surprising resilience in the fact of during the COVID-19. Although there have been challenges because of the financial and the global turmoil that has happened. So energy demand almost dipped about by 1/3 of what was the original level. But still, I think the energy sector as a whole, it has been able to kind of survive the pandemic. So that's that's all from my side as of now. Thank you. And of course, I would like to.
Thank you very much, Arjit. Sorry, I hear myself double. Okay, let's see if this goes better. Walid, you're back, and Xian Li, you have joined us. That's excellent. Maybe Walid, can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Yes, okay. I'm going to give you 45 seconds to explain us specifically the main measures which Egypt have done on renewable energy and efficiency, specifically in the post-COVID and economic recovery part, so that we can really focus on what is this momentum and how can we spread this. Could you, just to complement basically when you cut out before.
Okay, sorry for that. Okay,
no problem
quickly,
at all. This is just our new reality. Okay, don't worry.
Okay. I'm going to talk very quickly about the measures that Egypt already has taken into consideration to the post-COVID-19 recovery. First, Egypt stated the FIT, what we call it, the feed-in tariff for the solar prices to the national grid of electricity, and it revised this tariff several times and reduced to be complementary with all the other measures. Also, Egypt start what a very big program, what we call the waste to energy, and it stated also a feed-in tariff to the waste coming to generate energy. We had also the Minister of Trade and Industry issued a decree for the motors efficiency. It stipulates that you cannot use old motors in industry, so you have to either upgrade or purchase another motors with the efficiency, what we call the IE code. Also, the reduction of energy prices in natural gases, it's reduced from $6 for 1 million BTU of natural gas to 4.5 US dollar for cement, and $5 for industries like steel, aluminum, copper, and ceramics. Issuing the green bond was one of the very good initiatives in Egypt. We already started projects with 4.25 billion US dollar. In the first phase already, Egypt started 1.9 billion US dollars, almost half of the allocated amount. This type of projects, including all projects related to energy efficiency and renewable energy, these projects contribute about 16% in renewable energy, 19% in clean transport projects, and these are mainly what are the steps that are taken by Egypt to promote renewable energy and energy efficiency, especially after the COVID-19. This is in brief. I hope I'm taking too much time.
No, this was perfect. Thank you so much. But I think it was important to hear basically this component, what Egypt has done specifically in this time. And thanks for sticking to this time frame, which was really short. But it allows me to also introduce basically Xen Li, who has worked, and so Xen Li, you're not a representative of a country here in the Country Voices, but you have specifically worked on analysis of policies on industrial energy efficiency in China and India. And I think it's really interesting to have basically specifically this view on what have you observed in your analysis here on the role of policies in also in the post-COVID period, and what also the lessons we can learn from it for other countries, because the whole idea here is also to understand what's happening in the countries and how can we build and replicate this so that renewable energy and efficiency is being basically mainstreamed everywhere. Xen Li, do you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. Apparently Xen Li is not hearing me. I should have checked this before making. Okay, so in this case, while our colleagues are trying to find the solution, Alfred, you have heard now some examples. What I found really interesting, basically in your presentation, but also what we heard from the other countries is COVID has really created opportunities, but also awareness, I guess, because very often especially when I'm thinking about energy efficiency in industry, it's also that it's quite the awareness building on the industry side is quite complex. And now there is a real momentum. So listening to the other examples and reflecting on what has happened in South Africa, what would be your big recommendations and learnings you would want to spread, I guess, to build on these experiences?
Thank you, Rana. Yes, as a colleague of mine in South Africa, she's an energy manager at a large steel plant, integrated steel mill. And her belief is, and we've seen that replicate across many other industrial sectors too, is that you need a burning platform. So, there's nothing like a pandemic to pull people together. And your earlier question was how well do government departments work together? My quick response to that is not nearly as good as they should be. But COVID has certainly lent a hand in that. And what we see in terms of the general lessons learned in response to COVID is that there are almost two different approaches, in the sense that we have those companies that were regarded as essential services companies that really didn't stop working, and they are the ones that are really looking at digitalization and really upping their game a lot, where a lot of the other companies that were under very stringent measures of lockdown levels 5, 4, 3, and 2 couldn't operate. So it was completely out of their hand. They couldn't do anything other than work remotely, and they were limited in what they can do. They're back to work now, and they're starting to catch up, so to speak, with those that have been at it for 9 months. And they are starting to work through those problems together. But the one lesson that clearly I think we have learned is that an industry in South Africa has always been this way and always done things in this manner. They are not waiting for government guidance and direction. They are getting on with it. And at times, industry are almost leading policy development because of what they have done and what they have demonstrated in practice. And in South Africa, that's not dissimilar. And maybe just to give the next speaker time to connect, I just want to maybe answer that question you had earlier, Rana, about working together, ministries working together. And in terms of the green economy in South Africa, we have essentially the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, which funds us. We have the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, that's responsible for our big Eskom, our power utility. They're also responsible for all the legislation and laws and policy framework around energy. And then we have the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, and those three really form a cluster. And if you look at what the South African government has done in developing an enabling framework for a just transition to a low-carbon economy, they've really developed and provided platforms for intergovernmental engagement and clusters of departments to engage on common matters. But it was ineffective. It really hasn't worked. And largely through the necessity brought around through COVID, and also initiatives through the IEE project that I work in, where that is clearly a very, very key activity in KPI, we are starting to facilitate that intergovernmental discussion and talk. And we are seeing, emanating from some of the closer operation that we've observed in maybe 10 years for many government departments within this green economy. We're seeing the development of legislation and guidelines and support initiatives that are helping to generate develop more accurate policy, to generate the level of support required, and not fall behind industry too far. So we have, besides the National Energy Efficiency Strategy, the Integrated Resource Plan, we have minimum energy performance standards for a range of goods, including electric motors. We have annual emissions reporting. We have a carbon tax in place, really, for an economy that's hurting as much as ours. We're not so sure it's going to help much, but it's highly diluted because of very high thresholds and allowances within the carbon tax structure currently. But that's going to be renewed in 2022, and I think we're going to see a very different animal then. So in response to COVID, I find that industry itself is really taking up the cudgels and doing what they need to do to survive firstly, but to remain competitive and retain the market share and to stem unemployment. We're a country with a high unemployment level. So employment is almost interwoven into every measure, both whether it's energy efficiency, water efficiency, and everything else that we do within policy. Employment permeates all of that. So we're very conscious about the work we do, the policies developed, and its impact on employment in South Africa. So effectively, that is the scenario we have in South Africa now. In terms of legislation, we believe that as we move forward into digitalization, small-scale embedded generation was another example. I believe industry will move to the point where they'll just simply force government's hand, A, to work together, and B, to regulate or to pass that or to just develop that framework that enables them to operate successfully in that environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alfred. That's really very interesting and good summarizing. I would say, I would like to hear from the other panelists, basically, on 3 points I think you're touching upon. two entry points, which are really industrial perspective, surviving, economic opportunities, and costs, I think is, do you see this as a key driver in the response of industry? The other one is employment. What is the role of employment perspectives in the debates and of players coming together, government and industry coming together? And then this other part, which I think is really interesting, and we've heard it from some other countries too, that industry is basically, because there is such a pressure in the COVID time, coming together very actively and with lots of ambition and pressure, and informing or influencing and pushing governments more to move in the direction of sustainable energy and carbon. What are the experiences in India, Brazil, Egypt? Samira, are you jumping to the mic? Thank you.
In Brazil, we have a kind of a different situation regarding renewable energies, because we already have a very big participation of renewable energy in the matrix. But yes, we see a movement from the industry, and especially from industry and commercial sectors to use the free, what we call free market, free electricity market, to make contracts direct with energy, with renewable energies and renewable centrals for electricity. So this is something that it's already happening in Brazil for at least like 10 years, more than 10 years almost. And now with the solar PV movement also for distributed generation, also a lot of industries are entering this market, having their own mini centrals, mini power plants in their plants, and we see that this is a movement in Brazil. But I don't know something that's quite a movement from the industry, but I think it's a movement from society, and also for the historical role that Brazil plays in the climate policy globally. When you mentioned about the jobs, I think we understand that energy efficiency it's really a key sector to be a job creator in the next 10 years at least. We have made a study here in Brazil, and we found that we may have a job creation of almost 400,000 job places until 2030 in the energy efficiency sector. So for us, it's really important sector to invest, especially when we talk about buildings and energy efficiency in buildings, because the construction industry is also a very big job creator, and in Brazil it's also it's quite like this. Well, I don't remember the other points you mentioned.
No, but that's so. I'll just give you a quick follow-up question. You mentioned the building and construction sector. I know that, for instance, in Europe, this is a topic which is very, very much addressed, also because there is an opportunity for creating local jobs, and there are specific measures actually. Is this something which has in Brazil and created specific policies and support mechanism for this sector to engage in efficiency and potentially renewable energy in the economic recovery context?
You mean in the building sector?
Yes.
Yes, and yes. Yes, we have already some policies for the building sector in Brazil, and we have just launched a new program for social housing in Brazil, and all these programs we are trying to. It has already a movement from some years to have some energy efficiency and sustainable criteria in the social housing programs in Brazil. Still voluntary program for labeling energy efficiency labeling for buildings in Brazil. But we understand that this is so important, and we are now trying to making also a very big study to understand how it would be to make this labeling for the buildings compulsory in Brazil. So we are making a plan to make it compulsory. We are now having a lot of meetings with all the stakeholders in the sector, and we think this will be a very important sector to job creation and for the recovery of the economy in Brazil. We are now having this and also having a lot of public consultations, public calls for projects, also first for the public sector, but also for other sectors to participate and to engage in new retrofits and new buildings with all this concept of near zero energy buildings and things like that. But our main target is to make the labeling compulsory for the next years.
Okay, thank you. Arjun, maybe on India, on the question, so the success stories and what are key drivers? So basically, I understand that all country experiences we have here, there were already some plans there. We're very interested in understanding what happened with COVID. What is this opportunity that was created? What are policies, finance mechanisms, etc., we can put in place and spread as tools to really build on this opportunity? So here again, the question is cost, manufacturing sector. What is your view from India?
Yeah, so if you look at the Indian context, I already mentioned about the large deployment of renewable energy that is happening. And moreover, due to this COVID, it has thrown a lot of opportunities as well, especially when we are talking about being self-reliant. Now that we have a lot of renewable energy in place, and now that I also talked about the fact that we are trying to align the energy efficiency with renewable energy so as to the demand is reduced and we require lesser amount of renewable energy than otherwise would have required. So now due to this fact, what has happened is, if we look at the electric vehicle initiative, which we have been trying to push in a larger way. So we are already trying to develop this charging infrastructure and promote the deployment of electric vehicles. But at the same time, we know that if we are unable to power this electric vehicle through renewable energy, and then otherwise whatever the benefit is that there will lose it. So the large amount of renewable energy, of course, if we talk about the solar, we assume that huge amount of renewable energy will be generated in the daytime. So if we are trying to kind of come up with a mechanism wherein we can charge those electric vehicles in the daytime and then use the other part of the renewable energy or the other part of the energy in the night, and the charging type rate can be reduced. This is something which will again throw a lot of job opportunities as well, new avenues for creation of jobs. And if we look at now, if we talk about the manufacturing industries in particular, and one of the lessons which we have learned from other countries as well, and I think it is a globally now talked about, is the green hydrogen. I think we all know that we need to decarbonize the energy intensive industries. So to decarbonize, of course, in India also, right now the share of electricity in the total energy mix is around 18%. And we would very much like to increase that share from 18% to around 25%, which is the prevalent case in all developed countries. So to do that, of course, and we have a huge amount of renewable deployment in place. So the supply is there. Only thing is that we need to change our systems, especially the manufacturing industries, to go into the electrification. So energy efficiency is, of course, one of the important tools for decarbonizing. But then the other thing that is important now, and which is we are trying to explore, and it has been discussed in various G20 forums as well, about the hydrogen. But of course, again, if we use hydrogen from traditional fuels, it will not going to help us. So we need to use hydrogen from renewable energy, that is the green hydrogen. But then again, these are the new avenues, and these are the new things which the government has started talking about, like electric vehicles, the green hydrogen. So, and it will obviously going to throw up opportunities, and not only in the case of enhanced jobs, but also, I mean, upskilling the workers, and at the same time, we are trying to decarbonize the economy as well. So thank you. That's all from my side.
Here are good. What are your thoughts on the communications? So after having heard your co-panelists.
Okay.
So yes, basically, the opportunities post-COVID has really created. What are the drivers? What is different today, and what are policies and financial mechanisms you feel are good success story that could be spread and become recommendations?
Okay. I believe that COVID-19 give a very good opportunity for the renewable energy and energy efficiency projects and applications to enlarge in the Egyptian market. For example, the electricity system restructuring due to COVID-19 need to be upgraded and complemented with the renewable energy applications like PVs, like wind energies. So this COVID-19, all the electricity suppliers need to maintain their supply of electricity by introducing new technologies and new funding mechanism for new projects that can enhance the system for electricity production and supply. And now in Egypt, due to this, we have the biggest project in Aswan. It's called Bimban. It's with Siemens, and it is one of the biggest, and maybe it is the biggest project for solar energy in the world. These projects are due to the COVID-19 problem and pandemic that need non-traditional solutions to go through the supply problem. Other opportunities, like we have here in Egypt, other mechanism for new projects like the biogas projects, especially in the rural areas, and this is done on a household level. And we have as well on a bigger scale that can produce up to 1 megawatt of electricity. And we have several examples of this. Also, I would like to announce that we have a very good partnership with UNIDO in Egypt. We have what we call the PCP. It's a program for country partnership. It's for 5 years, dedicated to fund and implement renewable energy projects and all types of energy efficiency projects. It's for 5 years, starting the year 2020, and it will last by the end of year 2024. with a total budget of 170 million euros to cover and to enhance the renewable and energy efficiency sector. We have also a very big project, what we call the SHIP project, is solar heating project. It is also funded with the cooperation of the UNIDO. It's mainly for solar heating purposes at factories and industrial establishments. We have another project which I mentioned related to enhancing or upgrading the motors efficiency that is used, because we have done a program which it is what we call a STEP program with the IFC and the World Bank here in Egypt, and we found out that mainly the motors consumed about 60 to 70% of the factory electricity. So this is a major component that we need to highlight. That's why the Ministry of Trade and Industry issued a decree which prohibits any importing of old IEC motors, or even they give a grace period of 18 months for the replacement process. This could be also done by availing funds through the SMEs and through funding agency. So we are having a lot of activities that are maybe it was going okay before the COVID, but due to the COVID and due to the fact that we need to enhance this and invest in this sector, which is the renewable energy and energy efficiency sector, the country put a lot of legislation and a lot of incentives as well to the investors and to the SMEs to enter and penetrate this market heavily. And now we have in Egypt, before we were have a deficit of electricity, and now we have a surplus. Yes.
Yes, sorry, it's we are being asked to join again the plenary room, so it's really interesting to. Sorry for interrupting you. So I would like to thank all of you for great insights in what's happening in your countries. I see parallels and differences, and it will be a bit difficult to wrap it up. So please don't hesitate to use the chat box if you have other comments you want to share, and jump in. Thank you very much for an engaged discussion. See you in the plenary room.
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. I think we are all here. So let us start the discussion regarding enablers for progress. I think we all heard very useful welcome remarks from South Africa. So I'm not going to take too much of time for introduction. Just to introduce briefly myself, I'm Katarina Barunica, working as Industrial Development Officer in Department of Energy. And I would be moderating this session around three main questions. We have until 3:10 to discuss and then report back to the plenary. And I will kindly ask you to briefly just introduce yourself before providing views regarding the first question. So if you don't mind, I would suggest that we start with Mr. Tom Jennings. And the first question for discussion would be, what are the key components of an enabling environment for upscaling energy efficiency and renewable energy in industry? If anyhow possible, examples would be very much welcome. Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Great. Thanks, Katerina, and welcome, everyone. Just a quick introduction. I'm a director at the Carbon Trust. A Carbon Trust is an international organization with a mission to accelerate the transition to a sustainable low-carbon economy. We've been operating the last 20 years, initially set up by the UK government, mainly as an energy efficiency body to work with industry and the public sector on energy efficiency, since broadened out to renewables and the broader energy system, as well as broader sustainability services. And over the last decade have been going international. So we now have a footprint across the world. And The examples I'll use will draw from that. So at the moment in energy efficiency, we are operating in 6 countries in Asia through the FCDO ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program. We have been operating together with UNIDO on the SEforALL Industrial Accelerator in 5 countries, and we operate across Latin America. And so that complements our UK activities. So that's kind of where our experience is that I'll be pulling on today. With that in mind, to answer your question, and to make sure, I might not have got the enabling definition right, but the way I think about it, at least I'll share, and then everyone else can correct me. A couple of years back, we did a review of best practice energy efficiency policy, and the key conclusion from that is, well, 1, energy efficiency is hard, and everybody here will know that, and 2, that it needs to be tackled from multiple dimensions, and that by tackling it just from one dimension normally leads to failure. And so enabling has many different dimensions, and broadly, from our perspective, it's the policy environment, which is the bedrock and is absolutely critical. It's capacity building, and UNIDO does a lot of that good work with ISO 50001. It's creating the pipeline of investable opportunities, and then the 4th element is finance. And all 4 of those are critical to deliver energy efficiency. And so it's that, I guess, core philosophy that we took to the SEforALL Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator. But I've only got a number of minutes, so I'm actually going to focus on one today, which is finance, because I think through that initiative, through the Southeast Asia work, it's finance which we keep hearing is the remaining block to be properly addressed, particularly in countries who've already got quite a nice policy and regulatory footing. And to that end, I'll give one example, which is energy technology lists. So this is obviously one of many different examples. So the Carbon Trust has been delivering the UK's energy technology list for the last 2 decades. It's essentially a list of energy efficient and clean energy technologies that has been government approved and certified. To give you a feel, there's 60,000 products that have been assessed in total, 14,000 currently sitting on the list across 56 technology categories, so it's very broad. And there's 2 advantages of this. So one is from an industry user's perspective, the performance of that technology and therefore the paybacks have been technically certified. Secondly, at least in the UK, there has been a tax credit associated with using something on that list. And to get onto the list, one needs to be in the top 10% of the performing products. So there's a general nudge to continually push the best performing products. And then finally, and I think coming back to the finance point, it also then provides a route to finance. So in the UK, the ETL has supported £500 million of investment each year, so it's sizable, of which approximately 100 million capital allowance tax relief has been given to businesses. So a significant incentive to use the list historically. Internationally, when we talk about the energy technology list, there's a lot of interest, but we're not the only one with technology lists, and EBRD in particular have got their GTS, which is a similar concept, and they've been using that successfully in Eastern Europe, but they've been taking that list internationally as well. And over the last couple of years, including through the SEforALL program, we've been working with them to explore how to broaden the geographic scope and the value add of that list. And at the moment, we're working with them in China to explore how to embed and broaden the use of that list in that geography, and then critically, that will then be a key enabler of finance. So I've probably gone over my time allocation, but that's my crack at your question.
Great, thank you, Tom. Points. If I may move to Mr. Sabin regarding your views on enablers for and renewable energy industry. We also just heard now from Tom regarding finance and role that financing can play. So maybe Sabin, if you can briefly introduce yourself and give your views. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for having me here. So my name is Sabin Basnet. I'm the Senior Energy Efficiency Specialist at the Green Climate Fund. Before that, I used to work with the International Finance Corporation in DC as well as in South Africa. So I spent about 8 to 12 years there. And then so I've kind of, going into this question, I guess my background, so I started off as an energy auditor 20 years back, and then kind of moved my ways into, figuring out what was good and then, how to finance things. And then the finance actually led to, basically saying, okay, how do I get more money? The more money actually got me to what Tom was saying, it's not just money, but it's, there's a lot more that needs to happen in energy efficiency to actually make energy efficiency scale up to the potential that we need to really kind of meet the Paris Agreement targets. So, and that's actually gotten me to where I am now at the GCF. I think one of the key things that we get to do in the GCF is we get to play around, well, I wouldn't say play, we get to work with both policy side of things as well as on the investment and the finance side of things, and then overlay that with, with the countries and the needs of the countries to really kind of bring that, enabling environment at the country level so that, it has a home and it's able to run through things, right? So that's the thing that we're really trying to achieve at the fund. And then, for us, especially when we're looking at energy efficiency and then, and industry per se, everything that Tom just said resonates so well with me. I'm actually also talking to one of Tom's colleagues, Chris in Asia, to really kind of look at the GST as well to see how we can actually work on the GST together as well. So these are things that are really key things. The main thing is, we have policies, and I think policies are great. You have an overarching policy, but I think one of the key things that, if I'm going to kind of go down a little bit, is to say, what are the actionable policies, right? So what are the things that we can kind of work on that can, bring in financing or can bring implementation much more quicker. So one of the things that on the fund side, what we're really looking at and working with countries is, is looking at something like a GST, but through MEPS, right? So so the minimum energy performance standards, to kind of work on minimum energy performance standards, and then see how we can build the financing mechanism on top of that. So just to give you an example, so we are working on cooling, for instance. I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to push for the next 3 years. So on cooling, so we are working with a couple of countries on developing their MEPS, one, and then also parlaying that with their national cooling action plan. But the innovation that's coming out is we're also trying to use those MEPS, the way the MEPS are structured, to actually develop new financial mechanisms. So in one country, I can't go into the country now because it's an ongoing project which hasn't come to our board yet. But the cool thing is, we're using the MEPS as a means to work with utilities to set up an on-bill paying system, wherein the GCF is coming in and providing risk financing, so that the utilities can actually verify and go into it in a little bit of a less risk-free way to really kind of get that up and running. Because when you're looking at cooling in terms of green ACs, these are things that can be financed by utilities, and then and then us coming in on both the MEPS as well as the risk facility, that helps to really kind of move the markets into that direction. So those are kind of the things that we feel that are the enabling. So it's really kind of looking at policies at a little bit let's say, instead of going at a 20,000 foot level, to come at the 5,000 foot level, and then targeting a financial sort of, I wouldn't say a solution, but financial mechanisms that can really help to get things on the ground as much as possible. So let me just end there. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for sharing the very concrete example. I think we are all excited to see that project. Ashraf, if I may ask you to jump in next, briefly introduce yourself and provide your views on this question. Thank you.
Of course, thank you everyone, and thank you for having me. So as a quick introduction about myself, I work in Egypt and I'm managing the green economy financing facilities for the EBRD, actually a few of them at the moment. So there are multiple financing facilities that are working in parallel, developed by the EBRD and supported by other donors, including the Green Climate Fund, of course, and the EU. So we've been active in the Egyptian market since 2015, starting with like small pilot projects, and now I think we have approximately an envelope of $500 million or almost there, supporting the private sector investments, specifically SMEs, in renewable energy and energy efficiency. So I cannot agree with what has been said so far. We have I would say, a very good bird's eye view on how the market dynamics change. Like, for example, with regulations and policies here in Egypt, we've seen that before 2015, I used to work for UNIDO, for the Industrial Energy Efficiency Program, and we used to tap on doors for free technical assistance, and we had no demand. In Egypt, electricity was heavily subsidized. And with like 1 year later, with the partial removal of subsidy, we've seen demand increasing drastically on energy efficiency in the industrial sector. But this was mostly from, like, for example, energy intensive industries. Smaller companies that lack the technical know-how and technical capacity did not jump on that train at the time. They regretted that later, but at the time, this is what it was like. So same thing happened with renewable energy. So renewable energy virtually had no place in the power mix in Egypt, except for a large hydro that was built in the 70s. So with the change of regulations in 2016 and 17, introducing, like, more or less allowing the private sector to be part of the formula and introducing standard mechanisms like net metering and so on, as a financing facility, we've seen our pipeline completely shifting from 100% projects on energy efficiency to like 50% on renewable energy and the remaining on energy efficiency in less than a year's time. And this is still an ongoing process. So if I may add to the, like, more or less the awareness, capacity building, policy and regulations, like all the elements of an enabled market for energy efficiency and renewable energy, I would say we've also seen very strong benefits in having good technical assistance to financial institutions. I mean commercial. The multilaterals, they have their own know-how, like the GCF, the EBRD, and so on. But when it comes to commercial banks, like, I think the role of technical assistance played a very big role in making these banks comfortable making these investments and feeling that a very big part of the risk has already been assessed early on in the project's lifetime. So I think this is the only thing that has been missed from the conversation so far. Everything else, I fully agree with like the participants here.
Great, thank you, Ashraf. If I may ask you, Hemat, to go next, share your views. If there are any other points that you would want to highlight when it comes to deployment, large-scale deployment of renewable energy and energy efficiency.
Sure. Thank you, Katrina. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this session. Do appreciate the opportunity. So I'm Hemant Malya. I'm a senior program lead and lead the industrial sustainability team at Council on Energy, Environment and Water. We are a think tank based out of New Delhi, and pretty much all that I'll be talking about what's happening in India. Excuse me. So in terms of energy efficiency, in India, we have a program called the Perform, Achieve and Trade program, which is primarily responsible for energy efficiency initiatives in the industrial sector. Now, there are two, characteristics or features of this program which act as a limitation to, upscaling energy efficiency. First of all, the program is geared towards, what is called as designated consumers of energy, which essentially means these are large consumers above a specific absolute threshold of energy, And these designated consumers are enterprises as opposed to being plants, individual plants. So that is one feature. The second is the targets are based on mutual collaborative discussions on what the absolute reduction should be for each industry or industrial sector. Now, these kind of form limitations, in terms of upscaling energy efficiency. And so what we need is, expansion of the scale of, how energy efficiency is looked at beyond the large players, or large corporations, which anyhow have the wherewithal to implement energy efficiency measures, whereas the more inefficient players are down the chain, the smaller and medium-sized guys, which are not currently captured within the program. And the second is we need a benchmarking of energy efficiency from a best available technology perspective at a process level, or from a perspective of specific energy consumption at a product level. And if that is done, then there would be the enabling environment for those that have not participated thus far in energy efficiency measures. So that's about energy efficiency in the context of the Indian industry. Moving on to renewable energy, I mean, we can talk about it in two broad aspects. One is biofuels, and the other is renewable power. So in terms of biofuel, or biomass, India generates about 500 million tons plus biomass plus forest residues annually. That's not even accounting for millions of tons of municipal solid waste, tire, used cooking oil, bagasse from sugar making, and the list is on and on. However, the uptake of biomass or biofuel generation has been very limited, and a key enabling factor that is missing, or enabling tool that is missing, is a dynamic real-time mapping of generation and availability of biomass on a spatial and temporal level, because that is very essential for businesses to invest and develop business models that are sustainable. Now, finally, on renewable power, I think India has a very, very robust, target of 175 gigawatts of renewables by 2022 and 450 gigawatts by 2030. But right now, the way it is structured is, the increase in capacity is dependent on power sector or power demand growth. But we need to look at alternatives to increase the uptake. And one avenue that we see is green hydrogen or green ammonia, which is an alternative end use for renewable energy capacity growth. And if that were to happen, or even if you were to export some amount of green ammonia, hydrogen, etc., to countries that are much ahead on the curve, such as Japan, that would enable the ecosystem here in India to then be prepared for a larger kind of upscaling later in the decade when the economics are better for India. So that's kind of my opening remarks. Back to you, Katrina.
Great, thank you for sharing these views. And Jörg, let me just briefly repeat the question as you joined a bit later. So the question.
Yeah, so I just forgot to press the green button, so I did see and hear you, but you did not see and hear me. Yeah.
Oh, very good. Well,
okay,
if you
sorry
don't
that,
mind, then briefly introducing yourself and sharing your views right away.
Sure. Well, nice to meet you, everybody. So my name is Jörg Meinbauer. I'm the global head of power and utilities at Bureau Veritas. We are a French headquartered but global 80,000 people subject matter expert third-party organization. We've been in the power industry for a long time, but of course in recent years, last 2 decades, my power and utilities business has more and more become a renewables business, and that's probably the expertise I bring in here today. And actually want to build on Heman's comment, because I think what is missing in this whole conversation around industrial applications, that the conversation is too much project-based and not enough system-based. When we're talking about scaling up, and I think that is the conversation we're talking here today, we need to look at the whole electricity and energy system, of which industrial sector is only one part of it. So the more we electrify the electricity sector, the more industrial applications will benefit. And in the end, it is the same with the heat side of things, which Hemant alluded on with hydrogen. So I think this conversion of a historically more fossil-dominated supply chain, coming from upstream oil and gas, going down to either power generation or the transport or the industrial sector eventually, and is increasingly becoming an electrified supply chain where upstream oil and gas is replaced by the renewable sector, and then being converted either in electrified power generation applications, or converted into hydrogen for heat or transport applications. And I think that is in the end, and I think to some way I'm answering already your second questions in terms of, you know, how that can be scaled up. I think the only way how we will achieve significant scale. And I think the good news, maybe to answer on some of the comments on regulation and financing, I think the renewable generation part, if you look at the last 2 years, has made so tremendous progress in terms of the cost curve we've been seeing, that there I with no doubt would say that part of the industry is so mature that it will not need to be shy of competing with, let's say, the old part of the industry, and we will see this green electrification now step by step accelerating and happening. Where the big steps need to be made are probably more on the heat side, and that's where industry is most suffering from, because of course industry has a big component related to low-grade heat, where we probably have some solutions today already, but it's the high-grade heat where we will need to make some progress there. So that's my opening statement. Thank you.
Very much. Colleagues, I think we have 20 more minutes for 2 more questions. So let me go right away to the second question. And that would be, how can the opportunities from renewable energy, such as electricity and heat, applications for industry be scaled up? So we already heard some views, but maybe Tom, over to you again to share your views on how can we actually scale up, how can opportunities from renewable energy applications for industry be scaled up?
Sure. So I'm going to continue this theme on hydrogen and high temperature heat, which is obviously just a component of this, but I think it's the most important to decarbonize. And I think there's 2 angles that we can add to the discussion. So one is around the local energy system and industrial clusters. And so there's some really interesting work going on internationally on this. In the UK, the government recently announced a industrial cluster up, I think it's in Teesside. When one looks at the creation of hydrogen and the use of that, when one looks at the sharing of heat, taking a systems view within a industrial cluster unlocks a lot of value. That's obviously the more ambitious side. There's great opportunity in some of the more developing countries. So kind of looking beyond the UK, where there's an opportunity to build up those industrial zones. In some ways, that's going to be easier than doing that in a mature economy like the UK. But that's one aspect to consider. And then the other one on hydrogen is international collaboration. So we've all got COP coming up next year, and it's a great moment for the leaders of all our countries, whether they're from government or industry, to really face up to this big problem of decarbonizing heavy industry. And it is going to require some innovation. So we need to get the cost down of hydrogen chain, all the way from generation to transport to storage to use. And that includes both the technology, which will require some sizable demonstrators, the infrastructure to do that, and then of course this whole thing only works if one creates a market. So in the next decade, we need to create a whole hydrogen market. So not a small feat, and I think given that market is going to be global, then part of this does require international collaboration, and there are mechanisms to do that. And so a bit of a So the Carbon Trust is working together with Mission Innovation, which is a collaboration of over 20 countries on innovation, and that's one of a number of different mechanisms by which the world can come together and work on these problems collectively. So a discussion there a little bit on the medium to the longer term, but 10 years is not very long when it comes to industry infrastructure.
Great, thank you, Tom. Sabine, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have short time, so let me just jump to it. And then I'm just going to go build upon the theme that Tom also mentioned here as well, and also Jörg on industrial culture, industrial clusters, and systematic approach. So, I mean, one thing that on upscaling, one of the things that we've seen, especially when it comes to MSMEs, is engaging with large corporate buyers. Right. So, I mean, we're talking about large institutions, but at the same time, we're really trying to focus on the SMEs. And then so when we're looking at SMEs to really kind of get the scale in, is to bring in, large corporate buyers. So a good example that I can give to you guys is, when I was with IFC before, we actually worked with a lot of the textile industries and huge buyers like H&M, Levi's, and those guys. So when H&M was really looking into going, 100% renewable in their supply chain, that actually got their whole supply chain, both in Pakistan and in Bangladesh, really active. And they were basically coming to the IFC and then our technical assistants and saying, how can we do this better? And then so we started, really kind of looking at, bringing that in a much more larger scale. And then to add to that, the IFC also worked to develop a supplier finance mechanism when companies that and then before that, I mean, so another thing that H&M also did, it was not just saying, okay, we want to go 100% renewables, but they also provided an incentive where, they were providing, a platinum, gold, and a silver rating to their suppliers, wherein they got forward contracts. So if you're a platinum supplier, you got 5 years forward contract. If you were gold, I think 3 years. I forgot the exact numbers, but that gave the suppliers, the supply chain, some incentive. And then the IFC built a mechanism on top of that forward supply to build in a supply finance where we could actually use that supply finance contract as a means of working capital advancements and all of that based on the sustainability feature. So the thing is, we have policies, we have all of this, but I mean at the same time we have large corporate players that actually influence many of the supply chain players, that we are trying to engage with. And they would actually engage in a much more, let's just say, an economic manner than anyone else. So I think getting engaged with those guys early on would also be a way of really getting the scale in place. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that example. Ashraf, over to you.
Thank you. So I'll also try to be short. So I think there are two parts of more or less scaling the renewable energy. There is the more or less what Tom and Sabine mentioned, which is on international level. So there is on the technology level, on international green value chains, but there is also the local aspect, which would not be like one size that would fit all. Like it would greatly differ from one place to the other. So again, I'll speak from my very specific experience in the Middle East and North Africa. So in the MENA region, there is very low penetration, for example. We worked recently on a study. I remember the cooling was mentioned, for example, and the investments needed in the Middle East for the next 30 years is in billions of dollars in the industrial and commercial sector. And companies, although they will be interested, although on paper it would make perfect financial sense for them to work on replacement and optimization of their processes, they have sometimes they might have different priorities. And here I think one of the key elements, at least again, I'm referring to my very specific experience, is to enable service providers to bear some of the cost and the risks and the profits as well, of course, of these changes in the future. So also we cannot look at energy like completely isolated. So Egypt, again, as a water-stressed country, we are seeing more and more interest into desalination technologies, which is huge energy consumers. So this in itself could drive a higher penetration rate for renewable energies. So again, as I said, like the message here is that there is what has been mentioned on the international level that would affect every single country, and there are specifics that will change from one region to the other. So.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Hamant, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. I guess first of all, I echo Sabin's point. I think OEMs have a significant influence on their supply chain, and it's not only in terms of renewables, but also in terms of energy efficiency. So that's one point. Second is, I think we need to look at business models, right? So be it biofuels, where you're looking at feedstock which is seasonal. You have to build inventory, etc. So what are the business and financial models that can make such businesses viable? A similar aspect applies to MSMEs, right, or what we call micro, small and medium enterprises. Yes, clusters are very attractive in terms of the collective opportunity they provide, but at the same time you have these small businesses which may not have the wherewithal to kind of get access to credit, and even if they do, not access to cheap and reliable credit. So business models are essential to kind of upscale, be it energy efficiency or renewables. The one last point I want to make on this specific question is kind of making the power system or the grid more robust. So thus far we have been looking at balancing loads within the power system, but now we'll have to think about how do we balance not just power, but the demand for developing or producing green hydrogen, green ammonia, all of that. So increased level of intermittency, but the expectation of round the clock supply. So building robust power systems is going to be essential for future greening of the industrial sector.
Great. And Jörg, any views from your end?
Yeah, I'll add just a few thoughts. I think most has been said, but maybe one aspect, I mean, in renewables, we have seen what scale up can mean. I mean, the renewable industry has scaled up, but what we also can learn is what it means. It means to get to the appropriate cost levels as quick as possible. Only then industry will really explode, as it did in the last 2-3 years in the case of renewables. And the track record we've seen in renewables was not incredibly high speed, I would say. Yeah, I mean, it took us 25 years to get to a point where finally we're going through a full green electrification. I think there's some learning if we look now into hydrogen, how we can speed that up. I think I'm seeing some good signs, because in the end, what does it mean? You need an industry who can deliver. I think the power supply chain has now fully converted into something which is very much focused at the green electricity world. If now some of the oil and gas majors and some of the supply chains behind deliver on their promises, to build at a very quick pace hydrogen value chain, then we're going to be there maybe in 5 years instead of 25 years, and eventually get the cost levels we need in order to scale up.
Great, thank you. We have one last question and 10 minutes to go. How can we drive greater implementation and larger investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy in industry? And which interventions and sectors emerge as priority? So Tom, do you want to start again?
Yeah, sure. So part of this is back at my first answer, which is around finance and creating the pipeline and financial mechanisms. So I think kind of in the short term, that's the most critical. And in terms of, so I guess that's the key intervention. And in terms of sectors, so something like an energy technology, this is by its very nature cross-sectoral. So I guess that's how you do that. And then you need to take a more segmented sector by sector view. And then secondly, building on Jörg's comment on accelerating this and trying to do this quicker than we did in renewables, clearly we need to, again, as Jörg said, we need to get industry involved and leading this now. It always amazes me that we have these a lot of these policies, we have a panel here where we haven't got big industry on it, etc. And then there always seems to be a little bit of a disconnect to get government and industry to be properly working in hand. But there's ways to tackle that. So at the Carbon Trust, we have something called an accelerator model. I'll give an example in offshore wind to show how one can take renewables and apply it to here. So in offshore wind, we got all the leading offshore wind developers around a table. It was an industry-led scheme. So those developers, they created their own targets on the cost reduction that was required. They highlighted what was needed to get to that cost point. They then specified what the different demonstration programs were going to be required, and then all the different mechanisms to unlock that. And it's not just technology R&D, then there's the legal frameworks to share the data across them. There's the consenting policy to allow development in areas where there's wildlife, etc. A lot of these areas where industry needs to work together and collaborate. And collaboration is not the only answer. Competition is great too, but it is a key answer to accelerate this transition. So you take hydrogen as an example, the same model could be applied to hydrogen, as I said, on an international basis. And the great thing about letting industry lead is industry is already international and global, and their supply chains reached across the world. So I guess that would be my answer, is to leverage those kind of models that will allow industry to drive this as much as government.
Sorry, I was mute. Please, Sabin, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I think, yeah, I think I'm just going to go back to the first two questions that everybody said and combine everything together. I think points from Ashraf, Tom, Jörg, and Hemant as well. So for me, I think the scale really needs to be on, and making the process easy for financing. I mean, why I say this is, as Jörg said, I mean, the process for renewable energy took us 25 years, but now today, when you go to a bank and say you want to do a solar home system or a rooftop solar, they know exactly what you're talking about, and then they're going to start looking at a solar system as they would look at a car finance per se, right? But when you're looking at energy efficiency, I mean, there are so much variables. I mean, what type of boiler, what kind of this. So I mean, the question is still there. So I think the whole part, and going back to Tom's, GTS, so that we need to simplify this for the bankers. You need to dumb it down. I won't say dumb it down, but make bankers become bankers. Bankers aren't going to be energy engineers. So if we can get that to that point where they just are looking at a project from a from a credit risk or from a payment risk, things that they've done in their MBA and they've done in their loan processing, it makes our lives much more easier. So I think that's where we really need to get to, is the whole securitization, and that's where GTS, MEPS, and all these are very important to really bring that forward as well. And then I think just on the product side of things, I think one of the key things that we are looking into on the GCF side, and we've done one program already, and it's something that I used to think about, is also things like, bringing out things like energy performance insurance, where, you bring in an insurance product it's a de-risking mechanism, but what it does is it basically envelopes the performance side via the risk part, and then and it basically kind of, you have a project, you have the risk, and then you have your client. So you're basically covering this risk part through the insurance, and then the banker can jump right to the client and say, okay, do I trust this client? Yes, let me invest. So then you're getting more financial flows happening. So I think that's the part that I think really needs to kind of come in, is the ease of financing, and then you're really getting that in there, and it takes a village, as they say. And I think the village is all of the four things that Tom mentioned in the beginning, as well as Ashraf and everybody else. Thank you.
Great. Ashraf, over to you.
Okay, I think everything has been said. Everything I wanted has been said, and I have only 1 minute here. So I think the title here is more or less like streamlining the whole process for both like the end users and the financial sector. So things like technology selectors, green technology selectors, technology mapping, and so on and so forth. This makes things very clear for for unspecialized people. And that's the most important thing. So most of the industries, even, they cannot quantify what certain benefits they would get out of a technology, and so definitely a banker would not be able to do so. So simplifying and streamlining this process would make the whole market move much faster. So in terms of sectors, I think because that was part of your question, I think sectors are not very relevant here. I think there is virtually an opportunity in every single sector in the market. So.
Thank you. I take a note of that. Hemant, over to you.
Thank you. So I think, in terms of up and coming technologies such as green hydrogen or ammonia, I think it's important to recognize that, right now, the technology is not at a point where, the economics, compared to, conventional hydrocarbon fuels. So it's a chicken and egg situation where if you don't get it, going, then you don't get the critical mass necessary to actually make it economical. So, to a certain extent, we believe that, government supported credit guarantees for pilot plants such as for hydrogen are essential to get it. The second is, for things like biofuels, offtake agreements are essential because, if you want a financier on your side, to provide you credit for a business that is, at least in India, still in its nascent stages, offtake agreements definitely help. And then, something that is probably more of a domestic need is third-party captive generation. So right now, we have merchant plants that produce power, and we have, state-owned utilities, but all of them feed into the grid. But if, India could have third-party generation, which is, not more like a distributed generation, setup, then industry could definitely benefit because you could have a bundled system where RE could be balanced out with natural gas or battery storage, etc. So that's on in terms of policy and programs, but in terms of I guess which are the low-hanging fruit, I guess it's different for different countries. For India, definitely iron and steel is the elephant in the room. As far as hydrogen goes, a huge opportunity because we intend to double our steel capacity in the next 10 years. And also cement. I mean, less than 3% of our fuel going into cement is from biomass, but there's a huge opportunity to scale up there. So also the cement sector, I would say.
Great, thank you. And we have, I see 5 minutes extra. So Jörg, please share your views.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try to throw one more thought, which I think haven't been mentioned into the ring. So fortunately, so it's not all about cost in this world. Yeah, I think there's more and more, especially large corporations who also have an image, a reputation to build. And increasingly are doing that based on their contribution to fighting climate change. Now, what does that mean? There's more and more organizations who are willing to, show KPIs on how much of green electricity, of green heat, hydrogen they procure. And of course, you can do that through PPAs, yeah, but you can also do that. And I think this is one of the enablers we haven't been discussing about is procuring that energy from the market through mechanisms who enable trust. And coming from an organization which primary business purpose is to create trust as a subject matter expert organization, we've been monitoring this quite a while, and I think technology has made a lot of progress there. Because if you were an organization in Europe today, then you would want to buy with green electricity through green certificates, for example, then you would always have the risk of people telling you you're greenwashing your balance by just procuring cheap certificates somewhere in Northern Europe when they are cheap, and in fact you're not contributing to the environment. But I think through technologies like blockchain, for example, we see number of startups in the market who actively engaging in that. You can come to a point where you bring consumer and producer together. As a large corporation based in Germany, I can, but the same in the US, in India, and in China, I can procure directly from producers, and through blockchain technology be secure and trust that the electricity I procure eventually comes not only from a specific power station, a specific wind farm, but I can even choose I want to have my energy only procured from within 100 kilometers where my plant is located. And that obviously gives a completely different momentum to an organization who wants to build on reputation, on contribution to climate change. And it does not only get down to electricity. The same is true for hydrogen. We're seeing a lot of momentum on how can I make sure that the hydrogen which I eventually use is green hydrogen and not greenwashed blue or gray hydrogen. And the same applies in the end as I was just been describing with these certification schemes. So not only about costs, there are some other elements, but I repeat from my previous comment, cost obviously does help a lot. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for this. Thank you, colleagues, for a very fruitful discussion. I think I have 2 minutes to summarize all of your points. Any final words? I would say that we break up here, and I would thank you again for participating and sharing your views, and hope that you will continue following the VEF series.
Thank you very much for the moderation of the breakout sessions. Now we'll start with Mr. Brian Dean for the breakout session, for the breakout group 1 on global perspectives. The floor is yours, Brian.
Great. Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation, and 5 great panelists that were able to really walk through, number 1, that there's a big opportunity, but number 2, that it's not as simple as just picking the low-hanging fruit. And the great analogy from Ivan from SMAP was, well, if you only pick the low-hanging fruit, you're not going to be able to pick the entire crop. And so we don't want to do that. We want to actually be able to have, you know, as was discussed in that session, really an integrated approach where we're looking at all of the opportunities, and we're in that way able to pick the whole, have the whole harvest, and be more cost effective, and really get those benefits to society and the industrial sector as a whole. That comes from having an integrated planning that recognizes that unsustainable assets will expire, recognizing that money should not be put into those types of assets, instead put in energy efficient renewable asset. And that investment, one of the figures given was $6 trillion of investment over the next 3 years, with creating of jobs for renewables, efficiency, electrification, and of course innovation, making sure that we're continuing to be more sustainable over time. I think, you know, from there, it was really more about, well, what are the solutions that will get us there? And there's a lot of really good ones. Of course, electric motors are incredibly important in the industrial sector. Heat is really important in the industrial sector, and making sure that there's this, with both motors and with heat, making sure that there's this optimization process with energy efficiency, and then deploying the energy with renewables. And then there's the harder to abate sectors with, you know, the use of green hydrogen. And then how do we hit that base load? And what we've seen, of course, is that we need big time renewable energy, and this includes onshore and offshore, recognizing that offshore electric generation, ocean and offshore generation, is very untapped right now, and could actually hit a big core of that base load electricity need from the industrial sector. Yeah, and then, you know, there's the need for legislation, of course, revising subsidies, and making sure that efficiencies and renewables are, 1, in the plan, and 2, you know, a key part of the strategy moving forward. So I think those are, there was a lot of great points, but those were the key ones that I pulled out.
Thank you, Brian, for this summary. Actually, we have only 2 to 3 minutes per session, and we will get all the details once we have the summary reports you will prepare. Now I'll pass on the floor to Ms. Rana Adib about the second breakout group Rana, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ismail. Yeah, sorry for joining late. The discussion was really interesting, so we got stuck in our session. So I had panelists from, or voices experience shared from South Africa, Egypt, India, and Brazil mainly. And what is really interesting, I would say, is when we're looking at the country discussion is indeed there is a pre-COVID and a post-COVID situation. So COVID has really created opportunities. And interestingly, opportunities created, and I think Alfred had called it like this, and I'm quoting him here, you need a burning platform to make then people work together differently and recognize opportunities. So this was a burning platform. There is an urgency that has been created. And this urgency, I would say, has created different things, however, depending on the country situations. And I think this is, for me, a really interesting learning. It's quite difficult to generalize things. So in South Africa, where you have a load shedding situation before, the importance of the kilowatt hour consumed and the cost linked to this has come to the forefront of industry. In a country where you already have really high shares of renewable electricity, for instance, and where the energy consumption has reduced, the myth of we cannot move to 100% electricity in the grid is basically debunked. With the result that there is growing interest also from the industry sector to invest themselves in renewable electricity production and becoming prosumers, etc. So I think that's one learning. It has created opportunities. It has created different opportunities and a different awareness on the role of energy conversation, and of the role renewable energy can play. What is really interesting, I think, is we had right in the beginning a discussion about the systems approach. Economic opportunities, job creation, etc., is often hosted in another ministry than energy. And what is interesting, I think, is all these countries already had activities pre-COVID on efficiency and renewable energy, on industrialization, manufacturing. They also had interministerial discussions on or councils or whatever, but the pressure has really made these players work together better. So a systems approach might be improved and enabled more in COVID times. And another part is cost economic opportunities and job creation has really been an opportunity in all countries. So, and it's clearly key performance indicators on the policies put in place. I think this is throughout everything. And another part, an interesting part is with the reality that renewable energy is more present, economic savings are more present, this is also an opportunity to bring, basically move from a power transition to an energy transition and bring the whole discussion to end use sectors, whether it's the building sector we spoke about, obviously the industry sector, looking for a solution for industry sectors that are difficult to decarbonize, and also transportation. And I hope this was kind of a wrap up. So please, colleagues, send other messages in the chat if there is more to say. I'm pretty sure you have other men. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rana, for this summary. I am sure that you have captured the most important ones, and colleagues can add other additional comments in the chat or to the organizers. Now we are going to the third breakout group, and I will pass the floor to my colleague Katarina.
Great, thank you, Ismail. We had 3 questions that we try to provide answers or at least some thinking about. So the first question was, what are the key components of enabling environment for upscaling energy efficiency and renewable energy in industry? Here, there were 4 core areas that were highlighted. The first one was policy environment, which is seen as a bedrock. Then the second one, capacity building. Third one, creating pipeline for investments. And the fourth one that was highlighted was financing. When we talk about financing, what was highlighted is that the experiences is still remaining as a block to be substantially addressed. One example on how we can better focus on finance is by creating energy technology lists. There was an example provided, for instance, from Carbon Trust and EBRD, where the British government has a list of energy efficiency and clean energy technologies which are being approved and certified. When it comes to policy, the word that I really like that was mentioned was actionable policy. And this was one term that a colleague from Green Climate mentioned. So he was thinking, what are the actionable policies that can actually bring financing? He was giving examples of looking at minimal performance standards. And another example was when it comes to cooling sector. He mentioned a project which is looking at creating maps to develop new financial mechanisms and work with utilities, where the GCF actually provides risk financing and allows utilities to enter this space. Another key point in this question that was highlighted was the need of technical assistance to actually start explaining commercial financing institutions to make them comfortable with energy technologies. So here we are really talking about local commercial banks that need to get more aware and more educated on energy technologies. Another point that was highlighted that it's missing is that we are all focusing too much on projects and not on systems. I think, Rana, you also indicated in your summary the importance of systems. Question two, quickly. Question two for us was, how can the opportunities from renewable energy be scaled up? Here, there were 4 points that were highlighted as important. First one was international action. Second one was working with large players to influence their supply chain. Third one was to develop business models at local level. And the fourth one is to work systematically to rapidly draw down the cost of hydrogen in 5 years instead of, let's say, 25 years that we've seen from renewable energy. What was also highlighted, for instance, COP will be a great opportunity to talk about international collaboration and actually face up on how we can decarbonize industry. And another example that I really liked was how we can engage with large corporate buyers. So for instance, the example of H&M that decided to go 100% renewable in their supply chain and provided a scheme for their suppliers for them to be incentivized and actually also kind of trigger down the effect of using renewable energy along the entire supply chain. The last question that we have was, how can we drive greater implementation in large investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy? I think here one good news that was highlighted, that it's not anymore all about financing, that now large corporates are also thinking about their images and how they appear, that they can claim that, you know, they are actually 100% renewable energy supply chain. And here we are seeing the shift in kind of behaviors of different actors. So I will stop here. It's not even, you know, these are the key points that I was able to capture. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Katarina. Thank you very much, Brian and Rana. It was really interesting to listen to you and also to see the contribution of all the participants. I can only start one takeaway from that is that we have renewable energies and energy efficiency, and we can, I mean, qualify them as low-hanging fruits. And I think we have to see them as starters. But we still have the menu, the main menu is coming, and I hope that the dessert for all of us will be that we will contribute to tackle the climate change. And the second takeaway is that COVID-19 pandemic has been challenging humanity, and I think we have seen the action. And then when we work together, we can find solutions. Of course, it was an urgent solution, and I think I am optimistic that because of other, factors, that the climate change agenda will speed up and that SMEs will also find their way in how they can contribute not only to the climate change agenda, but also the air pollution agenda, the water issue, which will be, I think, the next, next to deal with. And I think when we bring in the big picture and then identify the multi-stakeholders, the decision makers, the academia contribution, the NGOs contribution, the citizens contribution, because it should not only always be a business case that will make it. It is also a matter of human responsibility. We have a responsibility, we live in this planet, and I think we need to take it at a greater level. I think we have already 2 minutes over the time, thank you very much for your contribution. And now I pass the floor to the organizers, I think Ana Lucia.
Yes, hi.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us and for the great contributions. We look forward to welcoming you in our next session. We actually have another one tomorrow for products if you're interested. But that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining. Remember, we have the networking station if you want to connect with our great pool of speakers and participants. And we look forward to welcoming you the next time. Thank you.